Samantha Fraser's case shows that a monster can't be re-educated, not even by a trained and experienced psychologist. When someone shows signs of being cruel, they should be left alone right away. People like that don't change, so they don't deserve a second chance. They are capable of the worst crimes and think they can get away with them. The terrible events took place in the summer of 2018 on Phillip, a quiet island in Australia close to Melbourne. But let's read the story in the right order. Adrian Basham was born in 1973 in Australia, where he grew up. The boy grew up in a family with a police officer. While he didn't do anything wrong in the eyes of the police in his early years, many people now believe that his cruel and violent attacks are linked to his family and childhood. When Adrian's father, James Basham, found out that his son had killed someone badly, he did not only not condemn him, but based on his experience as a police officer, he told him how to act to try to avoid getting in trouble. Samantha Fraser was born in the suburbs of Melbourne in the summer of 1980. Her parents, Janine and Travis Fraser, were friendly and loving, and they did everything they could to help their only daughter. They worked hard to help her learn and show off her skills. Samantha worked hard in school and played sports, and she consistently won awards for her outstanding performance. The girl then went to a well-known university and graduated with a red diploma from the psychology department. She kept doing sports like acrobatics, gymnastics, and dancing while she was in school, which helped her lead the student cheerleading team. After going to college, Samantha got a job as a psychotherapist at a large medical facility. Her coworkers and patients quickly came to respect and trust her. Samantha really loved what she was doing, and this job was her calling. Sam and Adrian met for the first time in late 2005. First, they were just friends, but soon, things turned romantic between them. Friends and family of this couple didn't understand what the two young people, who were so different in every way, had in common. Samantha was friendly, open, and nice, and she could always solve a problem in a peaceful way. Adrian, on the other hand, was very rude and harsh when he talked to people. He was also very angry and hostile. In spite of this, the couple made their relationship official a year and a half after they met. They bought a house in the suburbs of Melbourne, not far from where Samantha's parents live. Not long after, the man got a job with a big company that worked to develop mineral deposits. Because his job required him to go on business trips all the time, he wasn't at home very often. There's no doubt that this is why he and Samantha stayed married for so long. Adrian became a real tyrant at home and tried to control his wife in every way. He not only expected people to obey him without question, but he also did some strange things that might have been signs of a mental disorder. For instance, he insisted crazily that the house was always in perfect order, and this included both how clean it was and where everything was. It's small things like where the books are on the shelf or where the toiletries are in the bathroom. Any change could make him angry and violent right away. Samantha was a psychologist, so she knew how to make things better between people who were fighting. She hoped that her husband would change over time and become more calm and consistent. Along with that, they had 3 children together, 2 daughters, Jemima and April, and a son, Rex. But Adrian's character didn't change even when heirs showed up. In 2014, family problems led to physical abuse in another case. She then didn't say anything, didn't call the police, and didn't tell anyone what happened. People she cared about and her co-workers had no idea that her husband had put his hand on her. She was naive enough to think that this would not happen again. After a year, though, the same thing happened again. Adrian hit his wife. Samantha chose that this time it was the last straw. Samantha was also going crazy because her husband was throwing temper tantrums all the time and wanted to control her every move. She told the police in writing that her husband had beaten her, and then she took the kids and moved in with her parents. They got a divorce in the spring of 2017, and Samantha and their kids were given the family home by the court. They soon went back there. But Adrian had no plans to leave his ex-wife alone. He kept after her, making her life miserable. The young woman was always afraid for her life and the lives of her children because she didn't feel safe. She went to court and got an order that her ex-husband couldn't talk to them or try to get involved in their business in any way. But that didn't stop Basham. He stayed nearby and did everything he could to bother Samantha. At least one of Adrian's friends said that he promised to take away from his ex-wife everything she cares about, from the house to the kids. He also openly threatened to hurt her physically. The man told his friend again not long before the tragedy that Samantha would soon pay for everything. He also seemed dangerous, but the friend didn't take what he said seriously until he heard that the woman had died. Because Samantha was always scared and tense, she put bars on her windows, put an alarm system in her house, and put surveillance cameras outside her house. The woman told him that she was scared that her ex-husband would break into her house and hurt her or the kids. Samantha started to think that her ex-husband had calmed down a bit about a year after they got divorced. He disappeared from her view less often, which made her feel safer. Samantha even started an affair and made plans for a better, happier life. For Fraser's 38th birthday on July 22, 2018, she spent the day with close friends and a man she loves named Wayne. People who spent the holiday with her remember that she looked happy and in good spirits for herself and her family. A few days before the wedding, the man had proposed to the woman. After the wedding, they were going to take a long vacation and travel to forget about their problems. Samantha had already taken her kids to school the next morning and was on her way to work when she got a call from a friend telling her that Adrian was nearby. Samantha was worried about this, but she chose not to freak out and instead decided to be more careful. Her ex-husband was due to appear in court in a couple of weeks on charges of domestic violence. She was afraid that he would hurt her in some way because of the lawsuit. The woman told her best friend about her worries over the phone, but her friend reassured her. Samantha was never seen alive again after that talk. Samantha wasn't there to pick up her kids from school that day, so the teacher, who knew that things were tough in Samantha's family, called the police. The police went to their house right away to check on everything. At first, it looked like the mistress hadn't come back yet, but when the police chose to check the garage next to the house, which showed a very bad picture. The homeowner, who was 38 years old, was found dead hanging from the garage door chain. In general, the picture might have made it look like the young woman had killed herself, but Samantha looked like she had been hit by a truck. Samantha had not a single living thing on her, and the hair on her head was wet and falling over her face. She wasn't wearing the clothes she had on when she left the house in the morning, and she didn't have any shoes on. It was clear that someone else had been in the garage, and they had tried to make it look like Samantha had died on her own. It did a lot of wrong things though. Say, a broken down stepladder was lying next to the body, but the rope was so long that the woman's feet were touching the ground. Samantha had deep bruises under her eyes and on her temple. She had scrapes and hematomas all over her body from falling down and hitting things. The forensic medical examination later showed that the deceased had a serious head injury, which means that she was either already unconscious or dead when she was hanged. Experts in forensics found blood and epithelial particles under the victim's fingernails. This means that she desperately fought back and scratched her abuser. A lot of blood and small splatters of blood had been washed up on the floor, walls, and body of the car in the garage. In later tests, blood was also found on the rope that the body was hanging from in several places. Adrian Basham rode his motorcycle to his dad James's house in the evening of the same day. He looked stressed, and there were new scratches on his face. When his father asked him about it, he dodged the question, and when asked about the cuts, he said that he got them from riding his motorcycle without a helmet and scratching himself with tree branches. Then he got a big pack of wet wipes and began wiping down his car, saying that he wanted to get rid of the gnats that had stuck to it during the ride. As a former police officer, his dad knew right away that something wasn't right, and his professional instincts were right. When police came to James's door the next day with questions about his son and said he was the main suspect in the murder of his ex-wife, James knew what was going on. In the beginning, Basham Sr. said that he had not seen his son. To buy some time, he then told the heir what he should say and do in order to, if not get out of jail, at least get less time. Adrian did what his father told him to do and listened quietly as the charges were read to him. He then went to the station with the help of the lawyers his father had already hired. At first, Adrian flatly refused to help with the investigation He didn't say he wasn't guilty. He just didn't say anything and ignored all the questions. Still, the evidence that was gathered was enough. The investigators saw that the man had fresh scratches on his face and thought that Samantha had scratched him to protect herself. Blood and epithelial particles were found under her nails. There were also sweat marks on the rope that his ex-wife's body was hanging from. When Adrian's motorcycle was looked at, washed-up blood from the dead person was found on it. A bloody woman's blouse was also found in a trash can outside his dad's house. It looks like he tried to get rid of that proof but didn't have time. Samantha put up cameras outside her house not long before the terrible event, and they caught a man leaving the crime scene quickly on the day of the murder. There was no doubt that it was Adrian, even though his face was hidden by a hood pulled over his baseball cap. Piece by piece, the events of the victim's last day were put back together, and the picture that was made was shockingly violent. Basham broke the lock on the garage door while no one was home and went inside. He waited for his ex-wife to come home for several hours. She didn't know it, but Samantha drove into Adrian's garage and he attacked her before she could get out. The scratches on the attacker's face show how hard Fraser tried to fight back, but the two sides were not equal. He beat the woman until she passed out. To hide his tracks, he took off her bloody blouse and put on a black t-shirt he found in the house. He then poured water over her head to clean the blood out of her blonde hair. He then hung his ex-wife from the garage door with a rope around her neck. He put a stepladder on the floor next to the body just to be sure, but he didn't figure out how long the rope was. Adrian cleaned up the blood spots, but he didn't get the small splatters that were all over the place. This blows my mind. A young mother of 3 who was loved by all was found dead in her own garage. Killer tried to make it look like the person died of their own free will, but there were many signs that it wasn't true. Samantha's body was also in a state that showed she had accepted martyrdom. The worst part was that the victim had been living with this man for a long time, put up with his emotional and physical abuse, and raised his children while hoping that he would change. Adrian changed his plan when he realized that neither denying nor staying quiet would help because all the evidence pointed to him. Basham said that he was at his ex-wife's house that day, but he only wanted to talk to her and persuade her to drop her domestic violence lawsuit. People say that the conversation went badly and that fists were used, but he said he left afterward and Fraser was awake and aware at the time. Lawyers for the defendant insisted that their client was only guilty of battery and that Samantha turned her life over after that. But Samantha's family says she would never do that and did not leave her kids. She also had big plans for her life and was going to get married again soon. The murder case didn't start until the end of 2022. Older children of the divorced parents went to the sessions and spoke out against their father and asked for a fair punishment. The youngest son didn't show up to court. He chose not to subject himself to unnecessary stress. Besides that, the boy was scared and panicked about his father. The defense tried to show that the defendant did what he did because he was feeling bad, but this didn't work because Adrian planned the crime, waited several hours for his victim, and tried to get rid of evidence. The court didn't give its final decision on this case until February 2023. Adrian was found guilty of beating someone to death on purpose and given a life sentence without the chance of parole for at least 30 years. The children of Travis and Samantha Fraser were given to Jeanine and Travis Fraser as guardians. Share your opinion with us in the comments and subscribe to the channel for more. When we think about what makes a place great to live, we often think about how safe it is, how nice the neighborhood is, and how friendly the people who live there are. One country meets all of the requirements. Iceland is an island nation off the east coast of Greenland that has been voted one of the best places to live in the world over and over again. Just over 340,000 people live there, making it one of the world's smallest cities. But its stunning natural beauty makes up for it in a big way. People come from all over the world to see the natural springs and rolling hills. People from all over the world come to this small country to see its many attractions, such as its beautiful architecture and the aurora borealis. Because Iceland has harsh winters, there isn't always a lot of sunlight, But that just adds to the mystery of the place, which is so different from what most of us know and understand. One of the most appealing things about Iceland is the friendliness, openness, and kindness of its people. Due to the tough terrain and harsh winters, people rely on each other, value community, and take care of their neighbors. There are strong social attitudes against crime. They have no army, and their police officers do not carry guns. People often leave their doors unlocked and get lifts with strangers. The peace and quiet of Iceland would be broken one Friday night in 2017 by a brutal murder that seemed to have no reason. The country would be left in shock. We are going to talk about Birna Briansdóttir. Birna Briansdóttir lived in the southeast of Reykjavik. While her parents were no longer together, they remained on friendly terms, and she was the center of their world. She was bright and spirited, with her fiery personality reflected in her striking auburn hair. She was incredibly witty with a sharp sense of humor, which made her popular among her friends. She was carefree and whimsical, but always responsible, with this maturity reflected in her relationship with her family and her mature attitude toward work. Music was a big passion, and Birna wasn't picky. She would listen to anything from rap to pop and from rock to folk. It was this openness and free spirit that made so many people love her. Birna had a close group of friends and liked going out at night in Reykjavik. She worked in the fashion section of a busy department store. To relax, she would get drinks at the local bar after work and then go out to really let her hair down. For sure, this is what Birna did that night, January 13th, 2017. After closing the shop, she got drinks, played a few rounds of cards, and then went to the center of the capital to laugh, drink, and dance all night. They went to Horror, a place where new bands would play, and Birna was soon dancing on the stage. While her friends were ready to leave by 2 a.m., Birna wasn't. She wanted to keep having fun. She left the club just before 5 a.m. and walked out into the 9-degree weather. She then went to get falafel and then walked back to her house. A woman walking alone in Reykjavik was not rare. People trusted each other and looked out for each other. Due to her intoxication, she dropped coins and stumbled into a stranger on the side of the road. As she carried on walking, she turned a corner and walked down a narrow lane towards the sea. Then she vanished. Because she was known for being on time when she didn't show up for work, people were worried right away. Maria, a school friend who worked with Birna, was upset right away that she wasn't there. It got worse when she tried to call her cell phone. It wouldn't work, and Birna never turned off her phone. People thought she had just gone back to her dad's house to sleep off her hangover. Her friends who had been out with her that night also thought this, but she wasn't there. Scylla, Birna's mother, was called because she was also worried about where her daughter was. She knew Birna and knew that this wasn't like her at all. Without waiting, her family called the police right away to say she wasn't there. Realizing the power of social media, Scylla posted to her Facebook page, "Dear friends, it's not like her that we can't reach her. Please share and let's find her, Scylla." Iceland is a small community, and before long, Scylla's desperate pleas on Facebook were being shared, and news of Birna's disappearance began to circulate. The stress and worry of having a child go missing are unimaginable. Her parents couldn't sleep, and they persistently made calls to all the emergency services, desperately seeking any new information on Birna's whereabouts. The following day, the police were able to trace her last known mobile interaction before it went dead or was turned off. Just before 6 a.m., her phone pinged off a mobile tower in a port town, Hafnarfjörður, 6 miles outside of the capital. Right away, Scylla got in her car and drove there, calling out to her daughter and looking around the area. A group of family and friends worked with her to get Birna back home alive. Soon, 36 hours had passed since Birna had disappeared into the night in Reykjavik. Her friends and family were sure that something bad had happened to her. She was a trustworthy young woman, and this was not like her at all. Not much was known to the police, though. There was no proof of a murder or kidnapping, so they couldn't do much. As word of her disappearance spread, it quickly made the front page of every newspaper. Every newscaster in Iceland talked about Birna all the time. Her face was on every newspaper page. In the early hours of Sunday morning, her parents went to the police and begged them to search for her. They said she would not have gone off on her own accord, much less not told anyone where she was going. She had no money troubles or relationship problems. Everyone who knew Berna adored her. A case as baffling and unusual as this required Iceland's best detectives, one of which was Grim or Grimson. He had 30 years of investigative experience. He was even part of a special team who spent more than 5 years building a case against those whose misconduct and corruption contributed to the financial crash of 2009. After this, he returned to his roots as a police officer, saying he missed the fast-paced work. Like his colleagues, he too wasn't initially that concerned about Berna. There were many other factors that he had to consider. People do go missing in Iceland. Anything from mental health problems to simply staying at a friend's house and not telling people. Most missing people would eventually turn up. A lot of CCTV is set up in capital cities around the world, but Reykjavik isn't like most of them. The people of Iceland don't like being watched, and since crime isn't common, the people tend to police themselves. They watch out for each other and strangers, but someone saw her the night she went missing. CCTV showed her leaving the club with her coins in the ground and walking into a stranger. When Grimson checked the next camera less than a block away, she was gone. There were two options. Either she had gone down the side road off the corner or got into a car. Grimson paid close attention to the little things, and he was sure that the broken CCTV footage held a clue that would lead them to Berna. The red Kia Rio he saw was going the other way on the other side of the road from Berna. A short time after Berna had been seen at the Lebowski bar, he saw it drive by. The police had to follow up on this lead. What was next? They couldn't see the license plate, who was driving, or how many people were in the car. There were more than 100 of those kinds of cars in Iceland. This didn't make her parents feel better about their worries. Scylla was incandescent when they explained the quality of the tape was too poor to extract any more details from. Scylla said, "Can't you find it like in the movies?" Grimson replied, "It doesn't work like that." The police knew that even though they didn't have enough CCTV, the people in the area had hope. They asked the people of Iceland to help them. At a rare press conference, Grimson and Berna's upset family spoke in front of the cameras and begged Iceland to help them find her. In front of the media, Scylla showed what kind of person her daughter was by saying that she was very smart, bilingual, loved other cultures, and loved to travel. The police's hunch at the press conference would lead to a breakthrough. It proved right, and before long, they had their first lead. A pair of brothers decided to search Hafnarfjörður, where her phone had pinged off the tower, and when there, they headed towards the harbor. After searching in a fenced-off area, they found a pair of boots, black Doc Martens, identical to the pair that Berna had last been seen wearing. Using the power of social media, they posted a picture of them to Facebook, and before long, the officers arrived. They confirmed the shoes were Berna's. The police finally felt like they were making progress. Grimson told the police to carefully look through the CCTV footage, and soon they saw a picture they knew. At 6 a.m. on the morning Berna went missing, a red Kia Rio pulled into the harbor. A drunk man got out of the car and stumbled toward a fishing trawler that had already been docked. After that, the car drove off. Finally, they were able to read the license plate. The car had been rented by Thomas Muller Olsen, a 25-year-old fisherman from Greenland. A family had since rented the car and said there was a smell of chemicals coming from the back. After taking the car away, police were determined to find any sign of Berna. Eventually, they found a clue. There were blood spots in the back seat. So that they could find out if it was Berna, samples were quickly taken and sent to Sweden to be analyzed. For Grimson and his team, it was now a race against time. They needed to find the trawler and their only suspects, Thomas Muller Olsen and Nikolai Olsen. Thomas and Nikolai weren't related, but were crewmates on the trawler. Thomas was considered easygoing, approachable, and generally likable while on board. His phone pinged, and Thomas went pale. It was a news article saying that the ship he was on was linked to the disappearance of Berna. A journalist had contacted a Facebook group used by the men on board and asked who had rented the car and who was seen on the CCTV. Thomas was visibly shaken. His captain assured him if he was innocent, he would be fine. There was a huge challenge for Grimson and his team. The longer his suspects were on that boat, the longer they had to make up stories and get rid of anything that could be used against them. Not to worry, the ship's captain already had a plan. He read about the connection between the ship and Berna, so he turned the ship around and went back to Iceland. He and his top officers agreed that they would say the engine problems made them have to turn around, and the suspects couldn't read anything about the case because the Wi-Fi was turned off. In order to catch them off guard, the police sent members of their elite counter-terrorism squad, also known as the Viking Squad, to board the ship as soon as it arrived back in Iceland. Finally, the police were able to catch their two suspects after dropping officers off from a helicopter on the ship. The reaction of the public to the case was massive, and the whole country was waiting on tenterhooks for any news of what had happened to Berna. The case seemed to take over all aspects of Icelandic life. Although their intentions were good, online sleuths only added to the confusion, and it became hard to distinguish rumor from fact. Stories ranged from a body being found in a lake to Berna and other women being found alive on the trawler, swirled around social media. Grimson stayed calm and asked everyone else to do the same. People who meant well, though, were not helping the search for Berna. Around 11 p.m. on Wednesday, the ship came back into port, and the two suspects were handcuffed and brought back to Iceland. Then the terrible news came out. Berna's blood was found in the rental car. It didn't take the police long to question the two men. Nikolaj and Thomas were sure they hadn't hurt Berna, and they both told the same story about what happened that terrible night. They had split up and gone to different bars to drink before getting back together as the night was coming to a close. Nikolaj was already very drunk, so it was hard for him to remember what they said. He had no idea who they were, but they said they had picked up two girls on the street, and one of them was Berna. Thomas said he left Nikolaj at the ship and then drove off. Then he went to the back with the two girls and let them kiss. After an hour, he dropped them off. The police were inclined to believe Nikolaj. He had been seen walking away and was clearly in no fit state to do anything. However, when it came to Thomas, they had a bad feeling, and the evidence against him was stacking up. He was examined by a doctor who determined that the wounds on his chest were signs of a struggle or fight. When searching the ship, the police found a driver's license in the bin. It belonged to Berna. They also found drugs with a street value of nearly £1.5 million. Thomas claimed to have slept in the car, but the police checked the odometer, which showed that the car had been taken for a long drive. They also had CCTV on his person, because he was seen buying plastic bags and cleaning fluid before cleaning the inside of the car. The police didn't believe his story that he was sick and just trying to clean the car because they knew the blood spots were Berna's. The back of the car lit up when they used luminol to bring out any blood that couldn't be seen with the naked eye. This showed that it was completely covered in blood. 4 days after she vanished, Iceland launched the biggest search in its history. The search and rescue project manager said, "Today, she is our sister, our daughter." And that became the mantra. We don't live in a society where we tolerate a 20-year-old woman being abducted in the night. It wouldn't be long before the police found what they were looking for. A Coast Guard helicopter noticed something floating in the water near a local lighthouse, and it was a body. They had found Berna. When this news came out, Iceland went into mourning, and people were shocked and couldn't believe what they were hearing. Things like this only happened in movies and other places. In Iceland, they didn't happen. People in Greenland were shocked and saddened along with their Nordic neighbors. The main street in Reykjavik, where Berna had gone, was turned into a shrine with candles lit up. The funeral for Berna took place at the Hallgrímskirkja, which is the country's largest church. Over 2,000 people, including the president and prime minister, were there. People needed answers from the police, and they had to give them. First, they had to figure out what killed the person. Berna had been found naked, but they could find no evidence of a sexual assault. The examiner found that she had suffered blunt force trauma to the head and had been strangled as well. However, the official cause of death was ruled as drowning. She had survived the initial attack and was alive when she was put into the water. Even though Grimson and his team looked at all the evidence, they couldn't find any link between Nikolai's death and the murder of Berna. They didn't think he had anything to do with it. He was freed after 2 weeks in jail and hours of questioning. They looked back at Thomas again. His story hadn't changed, and he wasn't going to change it either. During 9 interviews with the police, he insisted that he was not guilty. As more evidence came in, the police still couldn't figure out why Thomas would kill Berna, even though they had a crime scene and a suspect. His DNA was found on a lace of Berna's Doc Martens, and his fingerprints were on her old driver's license from March 30th, 2017. Breaking news alerts were spreading all over Iceland. The police had charged Thomas Müller Olsen with drug possession and murder. Media interest in the story reached a fever pitch as his trial began in August of that year. It was during his trial that he sensationally changed his story. He said that there were not 2 girls, only one, Berna. He claimed that he had left the car to go to the bathroom, and Nikolai had driven off with Berna in the back seat. When he returned, she wasn't with him, shocking the court. He was now trying to pin the murder on his crewmate, admitting to the drug possession, but denying murder. At the end of September, the 3 judges found him guilty on all charges. He was then taken to start his 19-year prison sentence. When Thomas Müller Olsen tried to appeal his conviction, the High Court upheld it. The next year, the High Court refused to look at another appeal. There was a lot of shock in Iceland when Berna Brjánsdóttir was killed. This case will be remembered. It changed us a bit, our feeling of safety, the chaplain who led Berna's funeral said. More CCTV was put up around Reykjavik, and women became more cautious around strangers. Even though Grimson had been a police officer for 30 years, this was his first murder case. People in Iceland saw him as a hero because he was calm and coordinated. He is now proud to work for his country at the European Union's agency in The Hague for law enforcement cooperation. Even though Birna Brjánsdóttir's murder was a terrible event, her memory is still alive, and the people of Iceland are determined that she will never be forgotten. Share your opinion with us in the comments and subscribe to the channel for more. Wedding travel, also known as a honeymoon, is a significant event in the lives of young families. It can leave vivid memories of an unforgettable adventure, or, for example, provide a long-awaited escape from the mundane life somewhere on the Azure coast, under the shade of palm trees. But what if you go on a wedding trip and end up committing or being accused of a crime? Would the honeymoon be as bright and carefree in that case? I don't think so. Unforgettable, of course. Hellman, whose real name is Isabella Rodriguez, was born in 1975 in Colombia, a country where everyone speaks Spanish. But Isabella really dreamed of the American dream. She read English books and listened to English songs on the radio to learn the language as quickly as possible, so she could go to the north of Europe. Even though she was able to learn the language, she would always have a southern accent. This didn't stop the young woman from moving to Florida, where she worked as a real estate agent for people who only spoke Spanish. Isabella married William Hellman in 2002, even though her previous relationships didn't work out. They were married for 10 years, but their whole relationship was marked by constant fights and problems at home. Finally, when neither partner could take it any longer, they filed for divorce. The process took a very long 2 years. Isabella even found a new man during this time, and she hoped to be happy with him. Lewis Bennett was the name of the new lover. He was born in Great Britain but moved to Australia as a child and had dual citizenship. He went back to his home country to finish his education at the prestigious Camborne School of Mines. Lewis, on the other hand, never got a job in his field. He eventually went back to Australia and started his own business making solar panels. After 4 years, he went into the American market. His main office was in Florida, so the young and promising Lewis started using the internet to look for a wife there. Lewis tried to meet someone online for a long time, but had no luck. He looked at the profiles of women, but didn't pay much attention to them. The women who wrote to him first either turned him off or didn't interest him. But when he saw Isabella's picture, he thought she looked a lot like Jennifer Lopez, so he wrote to her. They wrote to each other for a long time, and Isabella talked about her hopes to move to the United States from Colombia, how hard it was for her to learn English, and her job search. She eventually told him about the men she dated in the past. Bennett didn't care at all about her past because she knew Isabella and William were going to get a divorce soon. In order to meet Louis in person, Isabella made plans to go to wherever he was, whether it was England, Australia, or even Thailand. Louis bought a catamaran to show his new girlfriend Isabella how much he liked her. He planned to take her on a trip around the Caribbean Sea. He dreamed of doing this since he moved around a lot as a child and found it hard to make lasting friends. In his spare time, he read adventure books by authors like Jules Verne and Robert Louis Stevenson. Treasure Island was his favorite book, and it would become an important part of his life. When Isabella had free time, like on vacation or over the weekend, she always went on trips with Louis. She saw that Louis almost forgot about work while on these expensive trips, though it could be said that his company's processes were highly automated, which gave him time to relax. When Isabella tried to talk to Louis about his work-life balance, he either laughed it off or said that he had a big inheritance and didn't need to worry about anything. Isabella was happy with his answer. The couple celebrated the birth of their daughter Amelia in July 2016. It was a big deal for both of them, and that's when the fight started. Isabella had a hard time deciding how to raise their daughter, or even which country would be best for her upbringing, because of things that had happened to her in the past. Louis wanted Amelia to grow up in Australia with his parents, but Isabella wanted to stay in the United States. As a compromise, they finally moved to Florida. In 2017, even though they already had a child together, they decided to get married. Isabella asked her husband to take her on a honeymoon on his catamaran because she thought that being on the water would bring them back together. Louis agreed, but the date was pushed back. They finally left on their romantic cruise at the end of April 2017. At first, their social media posts made it look like everything was going as planned for Isabella. Photos of them smiling and having a great time sailing around the Caribbean islands gave her hope. However, after the first photos from the honeymoon, there was silence for 2 weeks. When Isabella went online again, she told her family that they were in Cuba and were planning to go back to Florida, but they didn't know the exact plans yet. She also said that their internet connection was slow, which meant that they might not be reachable for a few days. In the middle of the night on May 15th, Louis called the Coast Guard to say he was lost and alone on a raft out at sea. Right away, the rescuers started looking for Louis. They found him near the Bahamas on a raft that was full of food and other supplies. Louis told a story about how he had asked Isabella to rest for a few hours after a long day and then given her control of the catamaran. A heavy thump from below woke him up after he went to take a nap in the cabin. He thought Isabella had been thrown overboard when he couldn't find her and saw that the catamaran was taking on water. He got his things together and moved to the rescue boat, thinking that her life vest would keep her safe. It was strange that he didn't use a beacon or a satellite phone to call for help. The Coast Guard didn't understand what was going on. They looked around and saw that there were no underwater rocks or reefs that could have sunk the boat like Louis said. The boat also had open escape hatches, which is against safety rules, and suggests that someone was trying to sink the ship on purpose. It was proven by divers that the holes in the catamaran's bottom were made from the inside. The condition of the boat did not match Louis's account of hitting rocks in the water. Another strange thing about the case was that Louis only put his things on the life raft, as if he didn't think he would find Isabella alive. He even brought silver coins that are hard to find that are hidden in aluminum tubes. Later, investigations showed that one of Louis's friends had stolen these coins in 2016. Louis was charged with smuggling because of how he behaved, the fact that there were open escape hatches, and other suspicious circumstances. While the person was being held for smuggling, the investigation went on and more evidence came to light. In the house where Isabella and Louis had lived, Recording devices were found that had recordings of Lewis making death threats against Isabella. Isabella told her friends about these threats and how she wanted to leave her husband, but she also wanted to give their marriage one more chance. Debts, real estate, electricity, and credit cards were the main things that made them fight. Lewis had a lot of debt but didn't. He declined to deal with his money problems and instead chose to travel instead of working. Even told Isabella she had to get a job to help him pay off his debts while he kept traveling. The investigation also found that between 2014 and 2016, Lewis sent money to other countries worth a total of $160,000. These transfers had something to do with the stolen collectible coins that Lewis had on him. Lewis was facing more charges of involuntary manslaughter as the evidence grew.
Lewis Bennett took a plea deal in November 2018 and pleaded guilty to both smuggling drugs and manslaughter by accident. He went to prison for 8 years and couldn't get any of Isabella's insurance payments or property. The court told Lewis that he had to give his daughter Amelia money because she would have to deal with the emotional pain of losing her mother as she grew up.
Share your opinion with us in the comments and subscribe to the channel for more. In April 2016, in Fort Worth, Texas, a shocking and brutal murder startled even experienced investigators. Elizabeth Paula Arellano worked as a paramedic before falling victim to this vicious and senseless act. Prepare to be shocked as you discover who carried out Elizabeth's execution. Her death was so peculiar that the police initially suggested it might have been voluntary. However, this explanation didn't align with the testimony provided by accidental witnesses to this tragic scene. Investigation teams had to go the extra mile in their efforts to understand everything and bring justice against the individual who committed this extremely brutal crime. Unfortunately, given his conduct, his sentence appeared too lenient and unfair compared to many others. Elizabeth Paula Arellano was born on August 16, 1987 in Fort Worth, Texas, where she would live her short life. Elizabeth spent much of her childhood alongside Alessandra and Giovanna, whom she found to be her companions. Elizabeth's birth father left when she was still young, showing no interest in or contact with his daughter. Soon thereafter, her mother, Juanita, remarried Fidel, who eventually treated their children as his own. Elizabeth developed an extremely close bond with Fidel, who supported and assisted in every way possible in all family matters. The girl studied diligently at school and dreamed of one day becoming a doctor. While in high school, she met Rudolph Arellano, whom she soon fell in love with. Elizabeth chose a man almost 8 years older than herself, causing some embarrassment among her parents. Nonetheless, they did not interfere with the romance, as their son-in-law appeared serious and reliable enough for them not to intervene. At 16 years old, just out of school, Elizabeth legally married her lover. Elizabeth and James eventually had 4 children together, 3 sons and a daughter. However, Elizabeth did not intend to become a housewife, as she remembered her childhood dream of becoming a doctor, and she graduated from medical school to work as a paramedic while planning to pursue further education. The young woman was kind and devoutly raised in Christian traditions. She took her children regularly to church and instilled in them love and compassion for their neighbors. Family and friends recognized her as an attentive listener who was always willing to lend a helping hand. At first, their marriage seemed strong and blissful, but after 13 years, it began to unravel as Rudolph tried his hardest to control every aspect of her life, becoming increasingly inconsiderate over time. Eventually, their union disintegrated entirely as his jealousy of his young wife became uncontrollable. After yet another jealousy-fueled argument initiated by Rudolph, Elizabeth took her children and moved them back to her parents' house. Although Rudolph attempted reconciliation with Elizabeth, she had grown tired of his fits of anger and didn't want the children exposed daily to their scandalous arguments. She mustered enough courage to officially file for a divorce, and shortly thereafter, she mysteriously vanished without a trace. According to friends and family, she appeared in good spirits and decided, in order to distract herself from family problems and the impending divorce, to visit a nearby club after work with colleagues. On Friday evening, April 15, 2016, the 28-year-old mother went to a fun place with some friends. There, she danced and had fun but did not consume alcohol due to her plans to return in her own car, which she had used to arrive at the club. Elizabeth arrived home well past midnight on April 16th. Once she parked the car, she called her friend, with whom she had spent the evening at the club, to inform them that she had already reached home and that everything was okay. However, after hanging up the phone, she never entered the house. The next morning, Juanita became very distressed to find that Elizabeth had not returned home as planned. Although Juanita knew Elizabeth had planned on spending the evening with friends, she expected Elizabeth would have returned long ago, as her car had been parked outside their house, indicating her return from the club. Juanita approached Elizabeth's car, only to find it unlocked with its key still in the ignition. Inside were Elizabeth's purse and cell phone belongings, indicating that something horrible must have occurred. As soon as she noticed Elizabeth was missing, Juanita immediately notified the police and filed a missing person report. At first, the police believed they could quickly solve the case with hot leads, hoping Elizabeth might still be alive, as there was no blood or signs of struggle visible inside the car. However, that proved not to be the case, and their first priority became reconstructing every aspect of that evening and night for all possible witnesses who might help identify and interrogate. Friends and colleagues of the young woman who spent the evening before she disappeared were interviewed, providing details about when she left and returned home. Additionally, several calls and messages from Rudolph Arellano, who was trying to contact Elizabeth throughout that evening, were found on her cell phone, all without success, as Elizabeth never answered his calls or texts. Police officers visited Rudolph's home the evening and night prior to ascertain his whereabouts and activities. According to Rudolph, he had spoken with his ex-spouse that night, who assured him she would bring their children over for the weekend visitation. But after she stopped answering his calls, he believed she had changed her mind and abandoned him. Arellano offered up an unlikely alibi. According to him, he spent the evening sitting at a local bar before returning home at midnight and going straight to sleep. On Friday afternoon, Rudolph was confirmed by his friends and others to have been relaxing in the same establishment. However, no one knew where he went after that, and there was no one to verify his claim. So, the police were unwilling to exclude Mr. Arellano as a suspect due to his lack of an alibi, and his behavior raised further suspicions. At his ex-wife's funeral, Rudolph put on a show, weeping at her coffin and telling Elizabeth that he wanted her death as much as his own. Elizabeth believed in the sincerity of these statements. Furthermore, he actively assisted in creating a charitable foundation to raise money for her farewell ceremony. However, after the conclusion of this act, when police investigators called him in for questioning again, he looked and behaved completely differently, as though nothing bad had taken place compared to what Elizabeth had witnessed before at that point in time. After reviewing all the CCTV footage from the last several weeks, a thorough assessment was completed. Under Elizabeth's route, it was determined that a car of similar make and color to Rudolph's had driven away from her parents' house at 3 a.m., according to witness accounts. A neighbor also remembers seeing this same vehicle parked not far from where Elizabeth had been killed on a nearby bridge. Furthermore, investigators raised more questions when they obtained Rudolph's cell phone data for the night of the crime. On that night, Rudolph made multiple calls near Elizabeth's place of employment and then near his mother-in-law and father-in-law's homes, as well as sending his ex-wife several messages trying to find out when she would return, but none were returned by her. He followed her to Elizabeth's parents' home, where he decided to wait. Once the police had enough evidence against Rudolph, they arrested and brought him into the station for further questioning. One of the key witnesses in Elizabeth and Rudolph's case was their eldest son. When shown the rope that had been cut from Elizabeth's neck, he reported having seen it earlier at his father's house, recalling playing with it himself. Furthermore, the boy recognized pieces of concrete left lying around their garden after their fence had been replaced. Fragments from this concrete could even be found inside Rudolph's car trunk. The investigation revealed that the man waited for his ex-wife at her parents' home before abducting her and forcing her into his car. where he had prepared rope and concrete in the trunk for use during the massacre at a nearby bridge. He planned on going unnoticed while carrying out this act of violence. Rudolf Arellano was arrested 10 days after his ex-wife's body was recovered from a lake, but denied all involvement in her murder, claiming he had been at home on that particular night. Given the severity of Rudolf's actions, death could have been imminent until, after consulting with his lawyer, he decided to confess and cooperate with the investigation to lessen his sentence. Arellano did not plead guilty until January 2019 when he presented evidence in court detailing how he abducted and murdered Juanita, the mother of their 4 children. Juanita fainted during his testimony, while Alessandra and Giovanna called Arellano a monster. Rudolf himself did not express any regret for his crime or apologize to those affected by it. Rather, he spoke nonchalantly and coldly about it, without offering an explanation for his motivations or actions. For this crime, he was sentenced to life without parole. Elizabeth's family members considered this sentence rather mild, noting that they forgave Rudolf because they did not want their hearts to be consumed by hatred towards him. Elizabeth is now responsible for raising her children, as her parents and sisters are responsible for providing care. Share your opinion with us in the comments and subscribe to the channel for more. Denise Dragon's well-known case shows how naive idealism, morbid jealousy, and a strong desire for illegal drugs can combine to cause tragedy and destroy 3 young lives at the same time. At the time of the tragedy, the oldest person involved, and I'm not afraid to use this word, was only 22 years old. He really tried hard to keep playing with the feelings of the 2 girls, who were only 17 and 19 years old. They were in a love triangle for a short time, but it ended in 2 pregnancies, crazy stalking, and murder. Mario Topanera was born in 1996 in a small town called Alcorcón in Spain, just outside of Madrid. The young man never put himself through the stress of school or looking for work. He lived with his parents when he was 22 years old and worked part-time jobs to pay the bills. Mario loved writing graffiti and was very good at drawing, but he couldn't use his art skills anywhere. He was happy with his small part-time jobs painting buildings outside and inside walls. The main way Mario made money was by selling illegal goods. He didn't do it himself. Instead, he found people who were interested and took them to a remote part of the city where his friends could get them anything they needed. Topanera made a lot of money from these deals, so he was always looking for people who could help him. It's unclear if Mario's parents knew what he was doing, but if they did, they clearly didn't care. Mario had a good looks and a strong personality. He was popular with both sexes. The young man was very good at using his charm to make friends and often dated several girls at the same time without meaning to. Denise Maria Dragon was born in Romania in 2001 to Emil and Daniela Dragon. Her parents were very young and having a hard time with money, so they had to go work in Spain and leave their little girl with her grandparents. After a few years, they were able to get married legally in another country, get a good job, and pretty much set up their daily lives. They moved their little daughter to their home in sunny Spain. The girl quickly made friends where she lived and found it easy to learn the language. At school, she did well in almost all of her classes and got good grades. The little girl was also interested in dancing, happily spent several hours a day in the studio, and regularly competed in a variety of events. When the girl was in middle school, her parents' marriage fell apart, and they decided to split up. The child went to live with her mother after the parents got divorced, but her father continued to care for her in every way, even though he had a new family. He helped her communicate, gave her money, and tried to be a part of her life in every way. Soon after, her mother also got married again, and a year later, the girl had a younger brother whom she loved and spent a lot of time with. When Denise was 16, she decided she wanted to learn how to do hair and become a stylist. She quit her studies and dance classes to focus on her new hobby full-time. Her parents didn't stop her or try to discourage her. They let their daughter make her own decisions to gain experience. Denise got a job at a beauty salon owned by family members. Rocio Martinez, a 19-year-old girl from the suburbs of Madrid, was the third main character in this dramatic story and the last link in the love triangle. Her father was a police officer who was transferred to Alcorcón, where he moved his whole family. Rocio was impulsive, scandalous, and sometimes even angry as a child. She was used to getting what she wanted and didn't put up with Rege. Martinez was never charged for what she did, though, because her father was a police officer and had a lot of connections. Rocio believed that no matter what she did, her father would get her out of trouble. Rocio was also very pretty, so she always had a lot of fans. When Denise stopped going to school and started working as a stylist, she had more time to hang out with her friends. Since high school, she had a best friend named Sylvia, to whom she confided all of her secrets and worries. One spring evening in 2018, Denise and her friend were walking around the city when they met Mario, a handsome and happy guy who immediately struck up a conversation with Denise. That same evening, they went on a date. A few days after meeting, Denise invited her chosen one to a family dinner to meet her mother. But Daniela did not agree with her daughter's choice. The woman did not like Denise's lover right away. Something about him scared her. Her mother quickly looked into him and was horrified to find out that Mario was involved in drug trafficking. Daniela had a serious talk with her daughter in the hopes that she would end their relationship. Denise quickly learned that Mario isn't as nice and kind as he acts. The young man tried to control every step of her passport, wanted to know where she went and who she talked to without her permission, took her phone, and checked her accounts and social networks for months. The girl in love hoped that her boyfriend would change so that they could have a strong, long-lasting relationship, but things only got worse as Mario started to treat her like his property. For another thing, she was only 17 years old and wasn't ready to be a mother or take care of a new child. Denise then decided to be honest with her mother and told her everything. She then asked her mother for advice on what to do next. The woman listened to her daughter and told her that she should end the pregnancy, but that was her choice. Denise gave it some more thought and then did what her mother told her to do. She had an abortion. When Panara found out, he was furious. He thought Denise had betrayed him by having the abortion, since she had no right to do so, and only he could decide what to do with the child. The couple's relationship ended, but the young man wouldn't let Denise go and leave her alone. He also promised to hurt her as much as she hurt him in return. He paid for his ex-wife and daughter a trip to one of the fashionable European resorts where they went together. The vacation really did Denise good. She calmed down, became a little relaxed, began to make plans for life again, and seemed to no longer think about Mario. But the vacation was over, and Denise returned home again. Mario did not ask Longpine for his former passport, and almost immediately began an affair with 19-year-old Rocio Martinez. This fiery, aggressive, and conflicted girl was the complete opposite of the quiet and calm Denise could make a scandal in the same place, go into a fight, or throw a tantrum. Rocio also experimented with illegal substances and could easily break the law, knowing that she would not be punished for it. With Mario, they quickly got together and had fun together because the guy could get any illegal drug she asked for, wanting to test its effect on himself. However, Mario couldn't forget and let go of his ex-girlfriend. He still wanted to control her to know where she was and what she was doing. Periodically, he wrote to her on social networks, called her, and even offered to resume the relationship. Denise, who had a very hard time with this breakup, met him from time to time and communicated with him, but was not going to reunite because of fear. When Martinez found out that her boyfriend was communicating with his ex, she made a terrible scandal and in a fit of rage screamed that she would kill them both. By that time, Mario had already realized what his chosen one was capable of, so he promised her that it would not happen again. However, Rocio's such an answer did not calm down, and she decided to destroy her rival, if not physically. Then morally, Rocio began to call Denise, showering her with insults and wishing her a speedy death. But this was not enough, and she began to send messages to her rival with threats of violent reprisals. However, Dragon considered these threats to be empty words and did not consider it necessary to contact the police because of them during that period. Rocio became pregnant, about which the first thing she wrote to her rival, saying that this child is desired and she will keep it for Denise. This news was a painful blow, but soon Martinez, due to poor health and addiction to illegal substances, lost the child, and all her anger she again poured out in a new threatening message to Denise. Denise, wanting to start a new life and forget about Mario, began an affair with a young man named Evan. They got married a month after meeting, and Evan moved in with her husband. Mario was hurt that his relationship with Denise ended so quickly. So quickly after his ex-girlfriend married someone else, he started calling and texting her again to set up dates with her. In November 2018, Mario and Rocio were having dinner at a small diner on the outskirts of the city. The guy left his phone on the table while he went out for a while, and Rocio decided to check it out. That's when she saw the calls and messages Mario had been sending to Dennis Martinez. She had a temper tantrum, screamed, cried, and tried to hit her young man. In response, Mario offered his girlfriend to personally clear things up with Denise. She thought it was her husband knocking on the door, so she opened it without looking through the peephole. Denise was still talking to her friend, so she could hear everything that happened next. When Denise saw her ex-lover's friend at the door, she only had time to say her name out loud and in shock before she was stabbed in the stomach. Rocio then left right away. The wounded Denise, losing consciousness, asked her friend to call an ambulance and told her who attacked her. Dragoni was taken to the hospital in critical condition. Doctors fought desperately for her life for several hours, but the wound was too deep. She lost a lot of blood and it was almost impossible to save her. After Rocio dealt the fatal blow to her rival, she ran back to the car, jumped into the cabin, and told Mario to get out of here. On the way, she confessed everything to him, and together they disposed of the crime weapon and washed the traces of blood off her hands and clothes. Mario decided it would be best for them to hide for a while. He called his relatives who lived in another city and asked them to visit. When they arrived, the relatives noticed that Rocio looked strange and was very nervous, but she wrote it off as malaise. The couple stayed overnight at Mario's relative's house, thinking about what to do and how to proceed. When they learned the next morning that Denise had died from the wound, Rocio immediately called her father and told him everything. She was sure that her dad would use all of his connections to get her out of jail this time, but the policeman's father didn't help his daughter, who had killed another man. He followed her to another city and then turned her over to the police. Sylvia, who had been talking to the victim on the phone at the time of the crime, was one of the main witnesses in the case. The case file also had many threatening messages that Rocio had sent to her rival over the course of the case. Surprisingly, Toby Nera wasn't involved in the crime. He denied all guilt and said he only took Rocio to his ex-girlfriend's house so that they could finally get along again and stop fighting. He also said he didn't know Rocio had a knife and didn't see any blood on her hands or clothes when she got back to his car. At their next court date, the couple denied their guilt again, this time saying that they were not at the scene at all. They said they had spent the whole evening at the house of one of Mario's relatives and that someone else had stabbed Denise to death. Martinez said she didn't hate her rival and didn't have any reason to kill her, but Rocio was found guilty and sent to prison for 18.5 years. Mario, on the other hand, got away with everything and started writing a new book right away, forgetting to be careful. Boasts that the girls were ready to kill each other for him. He told them in great detail what happened that terrible night, and the parents of dead Denise quickly learned of it. The Dragon family went back to court and asked that the man who killed their daughter be punished. This time, Top and Air were arrested, but after a few days, the man was freed on his own recognizance. In the end, he was found not guilty and was freed again. The parents of Denise tried to appeal the court's decision more than once, asking for Rocio's sentence to be lengthened and Mario to be jailed as an accomplice. However, Mario has still not been brought to justice. Share your opinion with us in the comments and subscribe to the channel for more. Cape Town is 400 miles away from the city of Port Elizabeth, which is at the western end of Algoa Bay, on the southeast coast of South Africa. This city is a major seaport and also has the sixth most people in South Africa. When Chris Panayiotou, then 18 years old, graduated from high school in this city in November 2004, he went to work for his dad's trading company. In the city and the areas around it, his father owned a large chain of stores and restaurants. Chris had always wanted to work in his dad's business, even when he was young. He was also very interested in running retail chains and growing the retail services industry. He was very active and determined, and his goals went far beyond being an executive and skilled worker under his father's supervision. Chris wanted to open his own fish restaurant near a 5-star hotel on Marina Drive and a big grocery store close to Kings Beach downtown. While Chris was helping his dad at a small diner on Market Street in the afternoon, he ran into an old high school friend. The friend invited Chris to a party on Friday night at Barney's Tavern, a popular beach spot for young people. Chris saw a pretty young girl drinking lemonade from a tall glass while sitting alone at the bar in a wicker bamboo chair and drinking beer from the establishment's specialty mug. Chris got up from his seat and went to meet her. She was 18 years old and her name was Jade Dinks. They hit it off right away, and they quickly found that they had a lot in common. Chris and Jade started dating after that party. They had no idea that their meeting at Barney's Tavern on Friday night would be the start of a terrible love triangle story that ended in tragedy. The girl named Jade was always happy and friendly, and she wanted to make other people feel good. Because she wanted to make a difference, she decided to become a teacher and started college in 2005. While Jade worked on her schoolwork, Chris started his own business. He started with a grocery store and then opened Infinite, a restaurant and bar in the neighborhood. Even though both Jade and Chris had a lot going on in their lives, their relationship grew stronger, like the roots of a young tree going deeper into the ground. They each made their own happy place where love and kindness seemed to last forever, and where days were full of smiles and hope for a bright future. Things started to go wrong in their relationship over time, mostly because Chris was seeing another woman. At first, Chanel Cooties was just working at the store that Chris owned, and their relationship was strictly business. But as time went on, their interactions turned into a secret love affair that they tried to hide with mysterious smiles and small movements. They met in secret in hotels in the area, and Chris even let Chanel stay with him while Jade was away. Chris and Jade seemed like a happy and successful young couple to their family and friends, especially after they got engaged and then married in 2012. Jade finished college and got a job at an elementary school, and Chris's business looked like it was doing well. However, Chris's relationship with Chanel continued, which made things difficult in their marriage. When Costa Panayiotou, Chris's father, found out that his son was having an affair with a sales clerk, he was very upset and angry. He couldn't understand how Chris, who had been seeing Jade for 8 years and knew she was smart, kind, and moral, could act so badly. Costa confronted Chris at Infinite while he was celebrating his engagement with friends, which turned into a heated argument. Costa told Chris that he would lose his inheritance if he kept seeing Chanel. Chris told his father that he was ending his relationship with Chanel, but they were still seeing each other behind his back. During this time, Jade didn't know that her fiancé was cheating on her. Chris's finances got worse as he tried to balance his two different lives. He spent a lot of money on gifts for Chanel, fancy hotel rooms, and other unnecessary things. While Chris was away from Jade more and more over the next 3 years, it hurt his business and his family. Jade started to feel more and more alone and ignored in her marriage. She told her friends how upset she was and how she had tried but failed to get them back to getting along. In September 2014, Jade was at the point of losing her mind. She wrote a very emotional letter on September 21st about how much she wanted love, a normal marriage, and a caring partner. She also told him how annoyed she was with Chris's secrecy and the distrust and uncertainty it caused. 3 big men in a rented car pulled up to the gate of Staring Glad Village on April 20th, 2015, in the early morning. This is where the young Panayiotou couple lived. They saw a young woman who was well-dressed and impatiently waiting by the road. 2 of the men got out of the car, but the driver told them to stay inside. A black BMW pulled up next to her and they watched. When she got in the car, It took off quickly, making the people who wanted to take her hostage angry. Like every other day, Jade left her house at 6:15 a.m., waiting for her friend and coworker Cheryl to pick her up in her BMW for their daily trip to work. Cheryl was running a little behind, and she saw the car from the day before with tinted windows at the curb. When Jade reached for her phone to call Cheryl, she saw two people coming from the bushes next to the road. Cheryl was only 10 minutes late, but Jade wasn't there. Cheryl tried to call Jade's cell phone and knock on her door, but got no answer. Cheryl finally called the police, and by 10 a.m., Jade Panayotou was officially reported missing. This led to a large-scale search that included police, a K-9 unit, and volunteers from the community. The search for Jade went on, but on the first day, nothing was found. The search started up again the next morning, and there was a reward for anyone who could help find her. Around 10 a.m., Angel, a K-9 officer, found Jade's dead body in a bushy ravine close to Quano Bushley. Even though she was fully dressed, a medical exam showed that she had been shot 3 times in the back and fatally in the head. Her jewelry and bank cards were missing, making it look like the people who killed her were trying to hide why they did it. Jade's family and friends were shocked and couldn't understand what had happened. Her co-workers and students were also very sad. The news of her death spread all over the city, and people were sad and confused on social media. On October 22nd, Jade's family held a memorial service at a Catholic church. This was followed by a funeral that was attended by a huge number of people from Port Elizabeth. People who knew and loved Jade were deeply saddened by her death. South African police service officers were also at the city cemetery. They thought Chris Panayotou's behavior during the funeral was strange and staged. As suspicions grew, the court later found that Chris's farewell speech looked a lot like a dedication on the internet by Charles Atkins to his late wife. Even though it wasn't direct proof, this discovery made people think that Chris may have been involved in killing his wife. The authorities decided to keep a close eye on him. Several other strange events also pointed to Chris's involvement in the murder of his wife. Luthando Sioni, a security guard at Chris's nightclub, was arrested by the police the night before the funeral because they thought he might have worked with the killer. Luthando said Chris had asked him to hire killers for his wife, and that Chris had already found 3 friends to carry out the plan. There was proof that someone tried to use Jade's bank cards on the day she was killed, and surveillance footage showed 2 men that Luthando identified as the hired killers. As a reward for his help, the police let Luthando go on the condition that he gather more evidence, including Chris's confession to killing his wife. Because he was told to, Luthando called Chris for a private conversation that was recorded. During the conversation, Chris said something that led to his arrest. After that, 3 more suspects were caught, and the crime's details were put back together. Hit men were sent by Chris to kill Jade Panayotou in the early hours of April 20, 2015. But because of an unplanned change in her plans, the execution was moved to the next day. On April 21st, Jade was taken hostage, taken to a remote area, and brutally killed. The thieves took her valuables and ran away. They tried to take money out of her bank cards but couldn't because the PIN they were using was wrong. The trial against Chris and the 2 mercenaries began on October 11, 2015, and was widely watched and reported on by the media. The prosecution said that Chris killed one of the women because he was having money problems that were made worse by his double life and his desire to kill one of the women. At the trial, different types of evidence were shown, such as Chanel Coutis's testimony, call logs, ATM videos, and photos. Along with the 2 hired killers, Chris was found guilty by the court and given a life sentence. On December 9, 2019, Chris's father, Costa Panayotou, died in a mysterious accident. This added another sad turn to the story. This made the story even more complicated and left a lot of questions unanswered. If Chris had anything to do with his father's death, it made an already scary story even scarier. Overall, Chris Panayotou's actions showed how far some people are willing to go to put their own needs ahead of the lives and well-being of those they care about. People are angry and upset about what he did. which led to the brutal murder of his wife Jade. It's still not clear if Chris had anything to do with his father's death, but he is now facing the consequences of his horrible crimes, which means he will never get away. Share your opinion with us in the comments and subscribe to the channel for more. It's a terrible and often destructive emotion that can make someone blind and make them do bad things. The terrible event that happened in Costa Rica a few years ago was caused by jealousy. In the history of forensics, this case is known as the case of Gerardo Cruz. But let's go through everything in order. The year he was born was February 1975 in Costa Rica. Not much is known about her family when she was young. The girl grew up in a place called Cuba with her mother, Sonia Fonseca. Samadi went to one of the nearby schools. Even when he was young, he showed that he was a difficult and troubled person. People in the area who knew her say she wouldn't put up with being turned down and that she often got what she wanted by force or lying. Samadi's beautiful looks and perfect body made it easy for men to fall in love with her, but she couldn't keep them. She was very pretty and knew how to make the most of her looks, but she put money and her own needs above all else out of greed and vanity, which turned off her suitors after a short time together. In her younger years, she was also very angry and jealous. Because she looks like a doll, Samadi Fonseca worked for a few years as Barbie in one of the big bookstores owned by the Universal Company. It was during this time that the girl got a nickname that made her feel good and stuck with her forever. Samadi had an affair with a successful reporter who worked on local TV not long after she graduated from high school. Her age difference with the man was 16 years. His name was Osvaldo Fernando Baleri. Samadi was in her longest and most serious relationship, but Baleri never asked her to marry him. They had a son named Christopher in 1996 and a daughter named Christina the next year. He broke up with the young woman in 2012, though, because of constant scandals and jealousy. He died suddenly at the age of 53. Not long after Baleri died, Samadi made the choice to do something on her own. She went to the house of her ex-lover and took it by changing the locks so that the family and heirs of the dead person could not get in. Samadi also took some valuable things that belonged to the person who died. The Baleri family was very angry and went to court right away to punish Samadi for stealing. The young woman was told to leave the house by the police, but she was not charged with a crime. Fonseca was in a lot of other relationships besides Miguel Angel Perez. She had her third child, a daughter named Maria, with him. Some reports say that this relationship was registered, but after a few years, they got a divorce. Some sources, though, say that Samadi wasn't married. She also gave her lover's last name to her youngest daughter, without telling him or getting his permission. Although it's interesting that some of Barbie's lovers have mysteriously vanished or died in strange ways, no one paid much attention to this for a long time. As an example, one of Samadi's lovers disappeared soon after he broke up with a woman who was rude and angry. The man has still not been found, and many people are sure that Fonseca has something to do with this case. However, strong proof of her guilt could not be found. Diaco, Samadi's other ex-lover, died in a terrible accident after they broke up. He was killed, and it looked like someone tried to rob him but failed. It was never found out who killed those people. Again, a lot of people thought Samadi had something to do with the crime, but no solid proof was found against her. But Gerardo Cruz was her most well-known victim. For Cruz, Costa Rica is home. He was born in San Jose in December 1992. He had never met his own father because the boy's real father had left the family before he was born. His mother, Ana Patricia, soon got married to Hermes Rodriguez. Rodriguez took the baby in and raised him as his own. After a few years, Gerardo got a sister named Milena. When the guy was young, he was calm and didn't worry about anything. His school was like any other. He liked motorcycles, and he met his true love, a girl named Carol, early in life. When Gerardo was 23, he moved in with his girlfriend and their 4-year-old daughter, Genesis Cruz. They lived with his aunt and uncle in the suburb of San Sebastian. To make sure his family had everything they needed, the young father got a job at a nearby bakery. He and his wife were very happy. Soon they found out for the second time that they were going to have a baby. Gerardo met Samadi in the summer of 2015 when Samadi was shopping at the bakery where Gerardo worked. The woman was 40 years old at the time, but she was still very pretty, liked dressing in sexy ways, and flirted with younger men. As she got older, she started having affairs with men who were much younger than her. The attention from younger lovers probably made her feel good, even though they were almost 20 years younger than her. Even though the beautiful woman was with Cruz's family, Cruz quickly fell in love with her and started meeting with her in secret. The fact that she started going to the bakery almost every day to see her young lover caught the attention of other workers. Along with Samadi, her oldest daughter Cristina, who was 19 years old at the time, often showed up with her. At first, Gerardo did a great job of keeping his family life in check while meeting with his mistress in secret. Neither of the women in his life knew about the other. But soon, Gerardo, as they call him, let down his guard. To show off how good he was with women, he started to brag to his friends and co-workers about Samadi and how she was a great mistress and gave him lots of gifts. The news quickly got to his mother, who tried to talk sense into her son and get him to leave his mistress. A few months into the relationship, Samadi learned that her lover was pregnant and had a young daughter. They broke up in October of that year, 2015. The woman was so mad that she called and texted Carol, calling her names and threatening to kill Gerardo if he didn't belong to her alone. Gerardo was able to ask his wife to forgive him and keep the family together. When it came to his ex-lover, he didn't pay attention to her threats because he thought she would quickly calm down and find a new boyfriend. It's possible that he had no idea how sneaky and mean Samadi would be. A mere few days after breaking up with Fonseca, Cruz happened upon a very public event. The young man was walking down a street in downtown when he saw an older man following a young girl while holding his phone so that the camera was under her miniskirt. The guy was so angry that he pulled out his phone and started recording what was going on. He then stopped the girl, told her everything, and told her to call the police. Cruz then went after the man and tried to take a picture of his face. He went after him for about 2 minutes and loudly asked him if he was having fun taking pictures of the girl's underwear without her knowledge. The man then got into a taxi and drove off. That same night, Gerardo posted the video he had made on his website. In just one night, the video went viral, and users quickly figured out that the old man was Luis Sulmano Delgado, a former official who worked for the Ministry of Finance. The media quickly picked up the video and spread it across the country, making Gerardo a national star. The young man was asked to be on TV and radio shows and was interviewed almost every day for print publications. He talked about what he had seen, said that the former official had done something wrong, and said that he had no regrets and would do it again. Aside from that, skilled lawyers hired by Sulmano Delgado started to work against Gerardo, accusing him of doing something wrong. They said that sharing the guy's videotape with other people was against the law, and they were getting ready to sue him in court. In fact, Cruz was shocked by what happened and didn't understand why they could judge him, but not the man who had done such a horrible thing to a girl. On October 7th, Gerardo did his last interview on the air of a local radio station. He was sure he was right and didn't think he had anything to worry about. Gerardo had planned to meet up with his friend Oswald after work the next day, but he suddenly called off the meeting, saying he had to take care of something important. Later, he learned that that day, he got a message from Samadi. In it, the young woman tricked him into going to the park in the evening for another interview. Gerardo didn't think anything was wrong. He just believed his ex-lover. When his shift was over, he went to the agreed-upon location, but there were no reporters waiting for him. Not long after, 2 unknown men showed up and took his bag. They then beat him and stabbed him several times in the chest and stomach before running away. Before he passed out, the hurt man was able to call his friend and tell them what happened. His friend then called the police and ambulance services right away. Gerardo was taken to the hospital right away, and doctors there fought for 42 days to save his life. During this time, Gerardo had a lot of surgeries, but they were not able to save him. The 19th of November, Cruz passed away in the ICU. Since not long before the tragedy, he had become a real celebrity, and the whole country knew about his condition. In interviews that they did from time to time, Gerardo's family asked everyone to pray for his recovery. That's why they didn't know who or why could hurt Gerardo in that way. People from all over came to the young man's funeral to show their support for his family. They all hoped that the killers would be caught quickly by the police and given a fair punishment. At first, there were different stories about what happened. The first idea was that it was a murder robbery. In fact, Gerardo was attacked in the park at night, his bag was stolen, and he was stabbed with a knife, which made it look like a normal theft. But just a few days before, Cruz put out a shocking video that implicated a well-known former official. So the second idea was that the person was killed in revenge. The media said and wrote that Sulmano Delgado might have hired hitmen to kill the young man, whose actions had hurt his reputation. The murder got a lot of attention in the news, and people took to the streets to demand that the killers be caught and punished. The police thought about different stories and looked for other people who might be Gerardo's enemies or people who wanted him to hurt. There was no progress in the investigation for a few months until May 2016, when a video from a street camera was found. There was video of two men running away from the place where Cruz was killed. These men were right away thought to be responsible, but it was up to the police to figure out who they were and find them. The tape was an important piece of evidence, and the case moved forward after it was made public. It was shown over and over on news shows, and people were told to pay close attention because these people could be dangerous criminals. The police could also make rough sketches of the men they were looking for and talk about their anthropometric data. Soon, one of the men's identities was known because he chose to turn himself in to the police and help with the investigation in the hopes that it would help him get a lighter sentence. Because he gave them information, the police were able to quickly find several other criminals who worked with him and the people who planned the crime. Soon, Samadi and her daughter Christina were taken into custody. Along with the mother and daughter, 3 other men were arrested. A cab driver named Ronald Arce, who had found the murderers, a worker named Cesar Chavez, who had acted as a go-between, and a young miner who had been directly involved in the attack. Later, Omar Costa was also arrested. He had been following the victim and telling people where he was on the day of the attack. Phone calls and text messages were used to figure out what each person's role was and how they were connected to the crime. Samedi gave the order for the murder and had carefully planned the whole thing, even including telling her daughter Christina about it. To find hitmen to kill Gerardo, they asked their friends Ronald and Cesar for help. They wanted to make it look like a failed robbery in a park at night. Later, Omar joined them. It was his job to make sure the victim went to the agreed-upon place. Samedi picked October 7th as the day of the attack. That day, she called all the people involved in the crime several times, gave them jobs, and made sure everyone stuck to the plan. In addition, the young woman demanded that they bring her some of her ex-lover's things as proof after they did the crime. Cruz thought he was going to an interview when he left work and went straight to the park. He tried not to be late for the meeting, but he was attacked and stabbed several times. His bag and jacket were then taken, and the customer was given them as proof. The texts that showed Samedi was guilty were the main proof. They clearly explained the murder plan and who was responsible for what. The woman was so sure that she could get away with it that she didn't even delete them. The woman did such a horrible thing because she was plain jealous. She didn't want to share her lover with his wife and thought that no one else would want him if he wasn't with her. She planned everything out and included her own daughter in her crime. Her daughter helped her with every part of the plan. The mother and daughter were arrested right away, and it was clear that they couldn't be freed on bail because the criminals would probably try to get away and leave the country. Their helpers were also put in jail before their trials, but Omar, who was in charge of surveillance, and the youngest person involved in the crime, were given to authorities who deal with juvenile offenders. The investigation took about a year and a half, and the trial of everyone involved in the crime plot didn't start until December 2017. It also turned out that Samadi had been charged with crimes before. In particular, She was arrested for making fake papers to get money from the government, but she only had to pay a fine. The story of Miguel Angel Perez has also come to light. He is the father of Samadi's youngest daughter. It turned out that the young woman gave the child the last name of a man she used to date without his permission. Afterward, she used the court to get him to pay her alimony, which she did for more than 3 years. When it was discovered that the whole process was fake, the con artist was given 3 years in prison and a big fine. The court did change her sentence, though, because she had a young child. The 5-year sentence was placed on hold. The murder victim's wife, Gerardo, admitted in court that she knew about his affair with Samadi and that Samadi had threatened to kill him. He did not pay much attention to the threats, though. The main reason for the crime was, as was already said, the woman's anger and pride because she couldn't accept that her young lover wanted to stay with his wife. The call logs showed that the mother and daughter planned the crime together. It was also made public that Christine had a nervous breakdown after the CCTV footage of the killers was made public. In tears, she called her mother and was about to tell the police what she had done. She tried to calm her daughter down by telling her that the investigation would never show who they were. The verdict wasn't made public until January 23, 2018. The court's decision said that Samadi would spend 30 years in prison. Ronald, Caesar, her daughter, and her sister all got 25 years in prison. One of the killers went to a place for young offenders to stay, but the other was not found at that time. Omar, who had been following the victim, was found not guilty, though. As moral compensation, $140,000 was given to the victim's family. The killers of Gerardo were given a fair sentence, which the family thanked the court for after the verdict was read. That being said, it was quickly made public that Samadi and Christina's lawyers had asked the appeals court to lower the sentences. It was tried again in November 2019. At the same time, the second killer's name came to light. According to Ronald, this person took part in the killings, but did not know the details of the plan. Ronald and Cesar also went to the appeals court to try to get the sentence shortened. Because of this, each person involved in the crime got 5 years taken off their sentence. At this point, Samadi is serving her 25-year sentence in a Costa Rican prison for women. Samadi, on the other hand, will spend almost 20 years in prison. Share your opinion with us in the comments and subscribe to the channel for more. Detective Jeremy Ogden from the Hobart, Indiana Police Department gazed upon a manuscript that had kept him busy for months. It revealed an emotionally wrenching tale involving 53-year-old Christopher Reagan's tragic story. Born in Detroit, Michigan, and receiving his education there, Christopher decided at the age of 20 to join those willing to protect their country by enlisting as an active duty soldier. Upon being accepted into service with honor and devotion by standing guard over citizens' peace, he forever changed his destiny with his choice to join. Christopher was sent to a military base near Marquette. While there, fate brought Christopher together with Terry from Iron River. Their friendship developed over time after meeting as young people often do on city streets. Shy people may hesitate to say hello, but they eventually began walking together and became closer friends over time. They remained close for years since Christopher's service prevented any chance for more meaningful relationships to form between them. At one point, Chris decided to leave military service and move to Traverse City, located nearby but far from where his beloved lived. But this did not become an obstacle to their feelings. On the contrary, communication became even stronger between them. Christopher proposed to Terry that they start an extended romantic relationship, knowing each other for years but never violating any boundaries or ethical rules. She readily agreed, and their long-distance romance began shortly afterward. Soon enough, Christopher and Terry realized they shared many interests, from appreciating nature to preferring an organized lifestyle to yearning for peace. Iron River became their ideal location, and they decided to move together. Christopher moved in with Terry while finding employment at a factory producing parts for military ships. Soon enough, he even had subordinates who reported directly to him. Life was finally looking bright, but after 2 years, complications arose in their relationship, with passion slowly diminishing as Christopher and Terry failed to address its difficulties. It eventually became evident that this could not continue, and they took the difficult decision to part ways peacefully and remain friendly toward each other. Christopher realized he could no longer continue living at Terry's house, so he decided to rent his own place instead. As time progressed, Chris realized he wanted a change of scenery as well. Iron River seemed too small, so Chris began looking for more dynamic cities like Asheville in North Carolina. Fate presented Christopher with the chance to start over and embark on an entirely new chapter of life. Not only would Asheville provide him with job opportunities, but it would also offer picturesque natural attractions, perfect conditions to launch himself into life anew. Christopher told Terry on October 14th that he had taken off work due to a doctor's appointment, suggesting they meet and go for a walk as they often did while living together. Christopher then proposed they meet later that afternoon and join her. Terry became worried when Christopher failed to contact her after October 15th and didn't return any calls or text messages from her girlfriend, Terry. Concerned for Christopher, Terry reached out to mutual friends, but they knew nothing. 10 days later, she filed a police report regarding Christopher's disappearance. Terry filed a report, but police quickly comforted her, assuring her that people often disappear for periods of time, only to return at some later point, sometimes even ending up somewhere new. Additionally, Terry revealed to police officers that Christopher had recently received a job offer in North Carolina. For them, this was another indicator that Christopher may have reached his new residence and begun living a completely different life after having cut all ties with the past. Investigators quickly launched an extensive investigation to disprove speculations. To do this, they identified Christopher's newly hired company and spoke to one of its employees to discover any information regarding Christopher. However, none could be obtained as Christopher hadn't shown up at work for over 10 days. Police speculated he might have been injured due to frequent trips outdoors alone. Search forces headed into nearby woods looking along routes Christopher had used. Specially trained dogs were deployed, yet no sign of Christopher was ever discovered. Terry suggested visiting Christopher's former apartment to ensure no accident had taken place, or perhaps find any traces that may give an idea as to his current whereabouts. Agreeing with her suggestion, investigators went directly to his former place of residence. They were shocked at what they found: items scattered across the floor and closet doors open. Their initial thought was likely Christopher was just being disorganized. However, Terry quickly dismissed this theory, asserting he wasn't as messy. Detectives began to suspect that all these circumstances might be linked to Rand's disappearance. So, after inspecting her home, it was decided to expand their search efforts and locate him on an even wider scale. Police searched carefully through the neighborhood before eventually discovering Reagan's car outside the city limits, about 8 miles from Iron River. Since it appeared unlikely he left it there intentionally, one door needed to be broken open for entry into it. At first, there was nothing suspicious in the vehicle's interior. On its seats were ordinary clothes typically found among locals: a hat, coat, and gloves. But one of the policemen noticed something peculiar on the front passenger seat: a small piece of yellow paper bearing an illustrated map describing an itinerary for travel. No specific addresses were indicated, only an itinerary, so they decided to follow it closely. Terry explained to Christopher that despite living in Iron River for years, he still hadn't learned the names of streets and roads, so he wrote down directions like turning at a bus stop or passing gas stations as guides for navigation. Terry noted that Christopher had indicated in his notes that this was his first trip to this location. Terry and her colleagues followed the route indicated on a piece of paper and stopped in front of a house listed in Christopher's notes before heading toward their final destination in a neighboring town. Investigators knocked on the door. They needed to establish who lived there and why Christopher had traveled this way. Jason Cochran was surprised when uniformed men appeared outside his home. Shortly afterward, his wife Kelly appeared, and they were informed by officers of Christopher Reagan's disappearance, that his abandoned car contained a piece of paper that pointed toward this address as part of their investigation. Kelly candidly revealed that she and Christopher worked at the same plant and were close. Although they hadn't spoken since mid-April, Kelly did manage to reconnect with Christopher in mid-June. Kelly Cran attempted to reach Chris via text messages between September and October, but received no reply. She assumed he had moved to North Carolina in search of employment, or possibly due to health concerns. Kelly also mentioned Christopher was having health problems and may have decided to start over somewhere new. When investigators found an address written down on a piece of paper found in Christopher's car, they became confused. Nonetheless, the couple remained willing to cooperate in any investigations that came their way. After brief questioning at Christopher's home, without finding what they needed, detectives decided to head out. Their next phase involved speaking with Christopher's co-workers at work before proceeding to interview workers and supervisors at his factory. One supervisor made mention of an affair between Christopher and Kelly Cochran, a rumor circulating among workers. After hearing this claim, investigators decided to re-interview both parties involved so as to gain clarity as to their true natures and establish exactly what had transpired between them. Kelly ultimately acknowledged her affair with Christopher, but could not tell him due to Jason being present. According to Kelly, their open relationship was fine, with Jason being aware of any such affairs on the side. However, discussing such sensitive topics might hurt his feelings and be painful for both parties involved. Christopher's co-workers refuted Kelly's statements, claiming Jason approved of their affair or there being any loose connections among their family, as she claimed. Jason followed Kelly into the police office, and their conversation revealed his opposition to Kelly's infidelity vehemently, thus making him an obvious suspect. However, due to a lack of evidence linking Jason with Christopher's disappearance, it became impossible for officers to conclude anything conclusively against Jason or Kelly. They had no choice but to release both from detention. The investigation continued for 5 months, without yielding any clear resolution of its mystery. On March 5, 2015, Hobart Police Department Detective Jeremy Ogden took on the case immediately and began actively working it. Ogden began by conducting a comprehensive analysis of Kelly Cochran and Jason Cochran's history, meeting in high school before moving in together post-graduation. Their personalities couldn't have been any more different. Kelly was open and loved talking, while Jason preferred listening more than starting conversations first. Despite these differences, Jason and Kelly decided to marry. Following their wedding, the two started their own company providing swimming pool maintenance services. It was modest, but provided them with a decent income. Most of Jason's pool maintenance duties fell upon his shoulders until overwork and strain took its toll. Jason began experiencing back problems and felt heavier every day. Eventually, Kelly took over running the business. When it became clear he couldn't continue running it himself, though this period proved challenging, she remained hopeful that Jason would soon recover and resume his duties once more. Kelly searched for ways to help Jason recover since medical drugs weren't providing enough relief. One day, she learned of a plant that offered hope for Jason's recovery. Unfortunately, its use in medical practice hadn't started yet and wasn't available everywhere they lived. It had even been banned in their state. To get this drug, they moved from Florida to Michigan's Iron River Township. Jason could visit his doctor and receive his prescription for this miracle plant. Suddenly, his agony would finally end. Early in 2014, a plant that specializes in manufacturing parts for U.S. warships hired 34-year-old Kelly Cochran, who had moved with her husband Jason. Kelly made every effort to secure financial well-being for herself and Jason. Therefore, they accepted employment at Christopher Reagan's plant, where Kelly also worked. Over time, Christopher and Kelly discovered commonalities of conversation that helped foster their friendship. This proved particularly vital, as Christopher had recently experienced difficulty with Terry in his relationship. After reviewing all available evidence, the prosecutor made a strong argument to a judge in Michigan in support of obtaining a search warrant for Cochran's residence. After successfully receiving a ruling from the judge on March 5th, she sent investigators straight away on March 6th to locate Cochran's address. Searches were carried out of the Cochran home with extreme care, looking for any signs that Kelly and Jason may have played any part in Christopher's disappearance. Unfortunately, all efforts proved futile. The only significant discovery was a book written by Jason under a pseudonym from video gaming culture. Although its title may cause amusement, its content was truly disturbing. Jason detailed horrific murder scenes of everyone who had wronged him. One character matched up perfectly with Christopher as they read through this dark and violent work. Suspicion increased surrounding Jason. Perhaps his crimes weren't made up, but instead stemmed from actual incidents he had committed himself. With these concerns in mind, investigators decided 3 weeks later to conduct another search of the Cochran house, hoping to unearth the evidence missed during their previous search. When police officers drove up to their home, they noticed no vehicles present and that both the yard and driveway were empty, as no answer came when knocking at their door. No one answered the door when knocked. As soon as Kelly and Jason had left town after the initial search, they moved quickly into Indiana, prompting investigators to become concerned they might never find evidence they needed for months, especially DNA samples of suspects like Jason Cochran. Michigan police officers reached out to their Indiana counterparts, asking them to collect samples instead, prompting Indiana officers to head toward Cochran's new address to take DNA samples instead. Ready to assist their Michigan colleagues, Indiana officers then traveled directly to Cochran's new address, where DNA samples would be taken before heading directly toward Jason, Cochran's new address. The couple didn't object, seeing no legitimate basis to charge them with murder, nor evidence of Christopher Reagan. Meanwhile, investigation gradually disbanded, leaving little hope of solving his disappearance. Time passed until, on February 22, 2016, an alarming phone call arrived at Hobart Police Station from Kelly Cochran, who was clearly distressed over what had transpired. She attempted to explain that Jason wasn't breathing, but her emotions rendered it impossible for her to provide concrete details. Rescuers arrived quickly on the scene, where Kelly attempted to prevent doctors from treating Jason due to her extreme terror and panic. Soon enough, however, it became evident that Jason no longer required assistance. Sitting in a chair, with his face lit up like it had been from extreme overheating, doctors were forced to confirm his death and send his body for forensic examination, while Kelly was handed over to a police patrol who took her back home with relatives living nearby on her street. Investigators were determined to ascertain what had transpired, so they conducted a search of Cochran's new home and discovered evidence in the form of a syringe needle at the foot of the marital bed. After inspecting Jason's body, an investigator concluded that his death was due to illegal drug abuse. However, this report came as a shock for detectives. Jason had an excessive amount of illegal substances in his system. However, the results from forensic tests indicated something more disturbing. His death had been caused by strangulation, as evidenced by bruises on his neck and face. So Jason, who had been suspected of kidnapping Christopher Reagan himself, became himself the victim of crime. This revelation raised new questions and necessitated a thorough re-examination of evidence. Immediately thereafter, forensic specialists turned their focus onto Kelly Cochran, whom many suspected as being linked to both incidents. She became suspect not only for Christopher's disappearance, but also in her husband's murder. The investigation became even more complex. On February 23, 2016, Kelly Cochran was summoned to testify in Jason's murder case at the police station. Investigators directly interrogated her about her possible involvement in his death and whether she administered excessive doses of illegal drugs to him. Regardless of the lack of concrete evidence and pressure from investigators, this young woman did not confess to either the murder of Jason or the kidnapping of Christopher. Investigators were unable to find sufficient proof of Kelly's guilt and were unable to arrest him, leading Detective Jeremy Ogden on a trail that eventually brought him face to face with Walter Hammerman, one of Jason's closest allies. During this investigation process, Detective Ogden met up with Walter Hammerman. Walter immediately ran to the police upon hearing of Kelly's shocking story of Jason's tragic death from illegal drugs, emphasizing how close they were. Walter assured his partner that any changes would certainly have been communicated. Jason had been taking medicinal herbs with the sole aim of relieving his back pain for quite some time now, yet Walter noticed his friend had fallen into an unstable situation recently. In March last year, Jason revealed his concerns with him regarding travel arrangements to Indiana, due to Iron River police involvement in a disappearance case. All this had had a lasting, impactful impression upon Jason. Walter witnessed Kelly become severely depressed and attempted suicide, necessitating medical intervention and therapy. Walter noticed a distinct change in Kelly's behavior as he took more control over his life. Jason seemed on edge, while in the past, the boys could spend hours playing video games together. Now he would avoid parties whenever his wife returned from work. This information became crucial in understanding what was transpiring within the Cochran family. After learning that Jason had died by strangulation, Detective Ogden devised an intricate plan to force Kelly Cochran to reveal the truth regarding Christopher Rian's fate. Walter, Jason's close companion and close ally, was chosen as bait, intended to lure Kelly into an incriminating trap and cause her to make mistakes that could potentially compromise Christopher Rian. Walter accepted a difficult role within this investigation, while playing out this performance before Kelly Cochran. On March 12, 2016, Walter called Kelly while under surveillance by police officers with listening devices, intending to present her with a letter purporting to come from Jason that contained something important and urgent. Walter explained to Kelly that Jason gave this letter shortly before his death, with instructions not to open it and send it immediately to police should anything occur. This came as quite a shock, both to Walter and to those watching over their situation. Yet even with this development, detectives had no direct evidence against her husband's killing. Investigators conducted numerous interrogation sessions with Kelly in an attempt to extract the truth. She denied her guilt throughout. On April 26, 2016, however, it became evident that Kelly Cochran had managed to slip away from their scrutiny. It seemed a mockery of justice, and detectives immediately joined forces with police officers from Iron River and Hobart in launching a federal manhunt against Kelly Cochran. Walter Hammerman was both shocked and alarmed that Kelly hadn't yet been apprehended. He worried she may get away with this crime once more and later attack him in return. Her phone had also been disconnected as though she were playing a cat-and-mouse game with the police. Detective Jeremy Ogden managed to piece together, after 2 long and hectic days of trying, that Kelly Cochran had managed to avoid detection by fleeing to Kentucky's Wingo town, more than 6 hours away from Hobart. On April 28th, Kelly was located at her cousin's house by police officers who issued the same warning. As soon as they received this information, an arrest team quickly proceeded to the house, knowing Kelly could be dangerous and likely attempt to flee. They moved swiftly without warning, and Kelly was apprehended and taken into custody that afternoon. Later that same evening, Detective Ogden arrived in Wingo, where he resumed interviews with suspect, alongside investigators from Indiana and Michigan. Once I spoke with Kelly Cochran, everything became crystal clear. Christopher Rian and Kelly's relationship went deeper and further than anyone imagined. Kelly truly loved him and dreamed of leaving this cursed city together and starting a new life together. But everything changed on October 13, 2015, when Jason learned about her cheating. They began fighting, and Jason remembered their wedding night pact whereby anyone found out cheating would be required to kill their partner as punishment. Kelly asserted that she never intended to take their agreement seriously. It had always seemed more like a joke to her. Jason warned Kelly if she didn't keep her vow, threatening that he would carry it out himself if necessary. Although Kelly didn't wish for this responsibility, she nevertheless helped Jason commit a horrifying crime. On October 14, 2015, Christopher Rian traveled to Kelly Cochran's house, hoping to take full advantage of their first meeting. Rian wanted every moment to count, their encounter, and every memory he would create together with Cochran. Kelly took full advantage of his absence from home to offer him dinner and an intimate time together. All plans went according to plan. Their evening promised to be memorable. After dining together on the first floor of Kelly's house, according to Kelly, they moved up onto the second. But their solitude was abruptly interrupted when Jason burst in with a rifle in hand, panicked and terrified. Christopher quickly recognized he was trapped, while Jason took aim and fired one shot directly at Christopher's head without delay. Chris was mortally wounded by Jason's bullet and died instantly. Following this event, Jason instructed his accomplices to bring Christopher's body down into the basement, where they dismembered it with a hacksaw. Eventually, all his limbs and head had been severed from its torso. The perpetrators then placed Christopher's remains into several trash bags before disposing of them by dumping them in the woods near Crystal Falls Village. Christopher's car was moved away to avoid suspicion, while they thoroughly cleaned Christopher's house to erase evidence of crime. They had become accomplices in an awful crime. Kelly Cochran was open about her involvement in Jason Cochran's tragic death, saying the plan to commit the act came about after learning of Kelly having had an affair and Jason becoming jealous that Kelly had chosen someone else as his partner. According to Cochran, this idea of revenge came when Jason learned of Kelly having another lover and decided on taking drastic measures against Kelly in revenge for what had transpired between them. Kelly wanted revenge against Christopher for taking away their happiness together and feeling betrayed by Kelly's spouse. Kelly revealed how deeply in love with Christopher she was and felt that his absence had prevented them from living life fully. Kelly struggled to cope with both her loss and its accompanying pain on a daily basis. Kelly loathed Jason for forcing her into doing what he forced her into, realizing she couldn't continue living peacefully with it. An opportunity presented itself when Jason complained of backache on February 22, 2016. Kelly decided it would be time for action against Jason. Kelly convinced Jason to give her an overdose of medication. Unfortunately, however, its effects weren't instantaneous, and Kelly covered his mouth and nose with her hands to ensure suffocation occurred before squeezing his neck to make sure Jason was dead, thus leading to bruised body parts on him. Kelly Cochran provided testimony that assisted law enforcement authorities to identify where Christopher's remains were buried. On May 18, 2016, Detective Jeremy Ogden, along with investigators and canine team, went to a site near Crystal Falls Village. This rarely visited neighborhood had become the site of an astonishing mystery. A team of investigators set off a thorough search around Lake Erie's surrounding woods, penetrating between trees to ensure no spots had been missed. One of their canine dogs suddenly sensed an odor and led the officers toward it. Officers were following the dog closely, expecting to discover something soon. Instead, it led them to an unassuming hill, covered with fallen leaves and branches. Upon clearing this area, investigators found objects including what looked to be human remains, unmistakably identifiable skulls. On closer examination, it was evident that Christopher Reagan had been murdered. A bullet hole attested to this. Investigators knew they had found Christopher's severed head. Additionally, there was evidence such as a .22 caliber bullet and broken gun found at the scene, as well as glasses belonging to Reagan that may have belonged to her. Dental records helped identify his remains, solving an investigation that had perplexed investigators for 2 years. Kelly Cochran was officially charged with murdering Christopher Regan and Jason Cochran in April 2016. On February 13, 2017, Michigan State Court officially arraigned this 34-year-old individual in Michigan State Court. The prosecutor noted Kelly was significantly reduced her role by being behind both crimes. Christopher only saw Kelly as a casual companion. Kelly, however, genuinely loved Christopher and planned for their future together. Christopher's refusal of her romantic advances resulted in fury, and Kelly decided to kill him by fabricating a story of an alliance between herself and Christopher's brother-in-law. Kelly confessed in court, yet presented another version. As per her allegations, she had been subject to abuse at the hands of her jealous husband, who orchestrated this act of violence. On November 9th, he hid in their basement and caught their lovers off guard before seizing an opportunity and using it as an excuse to grab a weapon in a fit of anger and shoot Christopher. Jason suggested dismembering Christopher Regan's body, and Kelly agreed by being threatened to kill Jason Cochran. When presented with this new version of events, however, the jury began questioning Kelly's guilt. After 3 hours of deliberation, they reached their verdict of premeditated murder of Christopher Regan, resulting in life imprisonment without parole for Kelly and 65 years for Cochran. Kelly Cochran was taken directly from the courtroom and sent directly to Crown Point Correctional Facility in Ypsilanti, Michigan, where she is serving her sentence with only regrets regarding her personal life. Kelly stated in one phone interview, "I tried my best at doing what was expected, from school through college and marriage. But ultimately, all my efforts went in vain. All I ever did was work, while my husband entertained himself with computer games. At prison, Kelly Cochran continues to reveal details of her crimes and claims she and Jason committed additional offenses. Christopher was just one of their many victims. Unfortunately, due to Kelly not disclosing additional crimes committed or victims she claims existed at this point in time, it's difficult for anyone to corroborate Kelly's statements. Her brother heard from Kelly that there may have been others, yet there is no concrete proof to back that up yet. Detective Jeremy Ogden from Hobart, Indiana Police Department is carefully scrutinizing every aspect in hope of uncovering clues or uncovering evidence pointing towards any additional crimes committed by either of Kelly or Jason Cochran. Hopefully, it can close another chapter in this twisted tale. Share your opinion with us in the comments and subscribe to the channel for more. 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 This is exactly what Kanyong's story is about. You might ask, is this really possible? How could a simple family dinner lead to a brutal murder that will shock everyone in Malaysia? The law will even be looked at by the local government. Let us look at this case. Princess Kany Ong Lake Yang is her full name. She was born in 1974 in Ipoh, Malaysia, into a big family. People from all over the world visit the city, but Kany had her sights set on something else. A better job and traveling. What else could a girl want? That being said, she knew that she had to work for her dream and that nothing good could just happen. First, Kany got a gold medal in high school. Then she went to the University of Hawaii and got a degree in economics here. After the start, more work had to be done to make things better. She went to Los Angeles and got a job at an advertising agency. She was already living on her own. The City of Dreams helped the girl see herself as an expert in her field. In 2001, Kany met Brandon Ong there. He was born in Singapore, like her father, but moved to the United States with his family when he was a child, and was now legally an American. Young Kany and Brandon quickly got married and moved to San Diego, which is right next door. But after only 2 years together, something bad happened. Kany's dad got liver cancer. The surgery her father was going to have in Malaysia was very serious, and it wasn't clear if he would live or die after it. She quickly packed her things and flew to her father on June 1st, leaving her husband in the United States. The surgery went well, the disease got better, and the doctor said that Kany's dad, who they called Bijan, would live a long time and definitely have grandchildren. Kany let out a sigh of relief. At last, she could go back to her husband and her favorite job. In the morning, she took a plane to Los Angeles. That night, Kany invited her whole family to a farewell dinner at Montes, their favorite restaurant that they used to go on vacation when Kany still lived with her parents. During dinner, Kany's mom got sick out of the blue and her sweet daughter offered to drive her home. She spent a long time looking for a parking ticket in her purse in the parking lot. When she couldn't find it, she realized she had left it in her car and forgotten about it. Kany then ran to the car and told her sisters to watch her mother. She wasn't seen for a long time. Her mother went to the car to check on her, but neither Kany's nor her daughters were there. When one of the sisters tried to call Kany's phone, it was even scarier to see that it was turned off. Her family knew her very well. She couldn't just disappear, and she would always call to let them know what had happened. But what could have happened in a parking lot that was locked up, only 300 feet from her family? The father of Kany asked the security guards to show him the video footage. His daughter was walking toward the car and checking her pockets and purse for her keys. At first, there was nothing strange about it. When they looked back, they saw a stranger moving behind Kany. He was speeding up and slowing down, just like Kany. The guards and Kany's worried father watched her car leave the parking lot from a different camera. There was a man behind the wheel, most likely the one who had followed her in the parking lot. It was strange that Kany was sitting in the passenger seat. The family called the police right away because it looked like someone was taking their child. People should praise the Malaysian police for starting to look for the missing woman as soon as they learned that the car had been stolen. After a few hours, a highway patrol officer saw a car on the road that fit the description. The police stopped the car to look at the papers so as not to scare the possible kidnapper. At the time, they weren't sure if it was a kidnapping or not for sure. The driver of the car stopped and gave the police officer his license, even though he looked tense. He tried to show the policeman some signs while sitting next to him, but the officer was busy checking the driver's license. He didn't understand, which is a shame. Kidnapper, on the other hand, paid attention, stepped on the gas, and drove away from the police car. The police shot at the car, but it got away. They still had the kidnapper's papers, though. His name was Ahmad Najib bin Aris, and he was 27 years old. Let me give you a short history of this person. They were born in 1976 and raised in Muar, Malaysia. He was the second child in a family of 4. Ahmad Najib went to secondary school until the 3rd year, but then he quit. He didn't go to the last 2 years of secondary school. In Malaysia, secondary school lasts for 5 years. He had to work to feed his family, and he worked hard. He went from Muar to Kuala Lumpur in 1998. In the end, Ahmad Najib got married and had 2 kids. Ahmad Najib was a good man who did his job well, according to people who knew him. Now let's get back to our case. After some time, it became clear that the shooting at the car had an effect. A young man went up to the police and told them a strange story. He told the story of a stranger who approached him at a roadside cafe while he was eating dinner. The stranger said that he was on vacation with his wife but had a flat tire on the way and could not go any further. The young man was happy to help the stranger. He got a jack from the trunk and gave it to the traveler when they got outside. But he saw bullet holes in the car, and in the front seat, he saw a scared woman who didn't look like a wife taking a carefree vacation with her husband. But the so-called husband didn't change the tire himself. He just played around with the jack for a while, complained, and then gave it back. The police knew right away that it was Kani, and that Ahmad was the one who took her. But that was the last time anyone saw Kani alive. Not long after, on the 3rd day, Kaniong, or rather her body, was found in a sewer manhole near a construction site. It was almost completely burned to the ground. The autopsy will show that the woman was stabbed several times in the stomach and then choked to death. Another thing that was found nearby the construction site was Kani's car, which had a shot tire and blood on the back seat. Even though the police had the killer's paperwork, they didn't go to Ahmad's house until after the body was found. For some reason, really interesting thing about this story is that the killer was at home, acting like nothing had happened, like he had. It was like he hadn't stolen someone else's car, kidnapped a woman who had come to see her sick father, and then driven away from police officers who were shooting at him. After Ahmad was caught, forensic tests showed that the car also had Ahmad's DNA in it, along with Kani's blood. To be clear, we want to say that murders in Malaysia are very uncommon, especially ones that are so violent. According to the criminal code, someone who kills someone deserves the death penalty, not even life in prison in this case. Ahmad knew that the police had all the information on him, so it's not clear what he was hoping for. He admitted everything, and even agreed to help with the investigation because he thought that would keep him from being put to death. Of course, the cruel criminal hid his identity at the trial by pretending to be a sheep. In the parking lot that night, he said, he was looking for a different woman, but thought he saw the wrong woman. He didn't realize it until he was in the car with Kani. He even said that they laughed about it together, and he later tried to get her to have sex with him. Again, he said that Kani wasn't even against it, and the marks on her neck from being strangled were just part of the woman's sexual fantasy, which is why she died. Ahmad, who was scared, decided to get rid of the body by setting Kani on fire. From beginning to end, Ahmad's lawyers made up this story because if they had been proven true, they would have only been found guilty of abusing the dead or, in the worst case, negligently killing Kani during the sexual encounter. If this isn't true and the defendant's crazy thoughts are all this, the lawyer said, then why didn't the captive run away while her captor changed the tire? If the person hadn't been stabbed in the stomach, this story might even sound plausible. The defense fell apart like a house of cards at this point. It was clear because the investigation had a different, more reliable account of what had happened, which was backed up by the autopsy. Ahmad saw a woman by herself in the parking lot outside of Monty's and followed her. When Kani opened her car door, he pointed a knife at her and told her to sit in the passenger seat. He then got behind the wheel himself. After the incident with the police and the failed attempt to fix a flat tire, he took the car to a place with no one else around, put Kani in the back seat, and used her more than once. When Kani tried to fight back, she was stabbed several times in the stomach and then strangled with a coat belt. Ahmad took her already dead body outside, threw it into the first manhole, and then put tires over it so no one would find it. His plan was to finally hide the evidence of the crime. When he came back to this manhole the next day with several gas cans, he put gasoline in Kani's body and set it on fire. It turned out that Ahmad had also raped 4 women, luckily none of whom died. They did not report it to the police because they were afraid of being caught, though. After what seemed like years, the court finally found the murderer guilty on February 23, 2005. Among other things, they gave Ahmad 10 lashes. Was this any better for the parents who had lost their daughter for good? Ahmad tried to appeal his sentence while he was in jail. He even wrote a letter to Selangor, the head of state, asking him to release him, but he was turned down. Ahmad got what was coming to him just 13 years after killing Kani. He was hanged in his cell on September 23, 2016. As I already said, this case got a lot of attention in Malaysia. People in the area were scared, not so much by the brutality of the murder and Ahmad's seemingly false belief that he would not be caught, but by the fact that it is not hard to kidnap someone in a busy shopping center, even if it's in a parking lot. To make sure this didn't happen again, the Malaysian government started to put up as many CCTV cameras as they could all over the country. They also hired more security guards for shopping malls and even made parking spots just for women. For these reasons, it is very sad that the life of an innocent woman who flew from tens of thousands of miles away to be with her father for 2 weeks had to be sacrificed. Share your opinion with us in the comments and subscribe to the channel for more. In the mid-1920s, the story of Dina Thompson, a British woman who was known as the Black Widow, was the subject of many crime shows and documentaries. At first glance, this woman seemed nice, but she turned out to be a pathological liar and con artist who killed at least one man who loved her deeply. Dina got away with many crimes, but in 2003, she was finally put in jail. Even though the person was facing life in prison, the court was surprisingly lenient and let them out on parole. So in 2022, one of the most dangerous criminals got away with her crimes after miraculously surviving her evil ex-husband. Experts say that the fact that Thompson's victims were always men may be a sign that the criminal experienced some kind of trauma as a child or teen. Dina, on the other hand, had a very good childhood. The girl was born in North London in 1960 and grew up with her whole family. Their family didn't have much, but they made sure their daughter had everything she needed. Their head of the family worked as a prison guard and was very into sports. Dina's father encouraged her to go to gyms as a child, where she worked hard at gymnastics. In addition, the man often took his daughter with him to all kinds of sports competitions, even ones that were held in other countries. As a child, Dina was active, happy, and friendly. She quickly became friends with her peers and, as she got older, learned how to get guys' attention quickly. The girl went to college after high school and then got a job at a bank in the area. When Dina was 22, she met Lee Wyatt, who would become her first husband. Someone set them up on a blind date, which is how they met in the first place. As soon as the two young people met, they fell in love and a rough romance began. They got along great and spent a lot of time together. After 2 years, they made their relationship official. After getting married, the couple moved to Yapton, a small town in the country with only 3,000 people. Soon after, they had a son, and the new parents slowly started their own business by making one-of-a-kind soft toys based on pictures they came up with together. At the same time, Dina worked as a cashier for a construction company. Neighbors said that their family was very happy and doing well. The family head was often away on business trips and wasn't at home for long periods of time. When it came to his neighbors, the man hardly ever talked to them, but his wife quickly became friendly with people in the area. Dina knew how to get along with others, and men were quick to trust her. The pretty young woman often caught their attention. Dina met a young reporter named Julian Webb at the start of the 1990s. The man offered to use her as a model for ads for clothes and home goods, and soon her pictures were in newspapers and magazines in the area. Dina was happy to pose for the picture and didn't mind being looked at. Lee Wyatt hadn't been home in months, and no one was sure where he was or what was wrong with him. It turned out that Lee had been in the small town of New Key the whole time, which is almost on the other side of the country. His plan was to hide from the mafia, so he lived there under a fake name and fake papers. The man's wife told him a series of clever lies to make him believe that their family was in grave danger and that the only way out was to run away. In addition to making unique soft toys, the couple was also known for making a leprechaun named Sean, which sold well and became somewhat famous. Around the beginning of 1991, Dina told her husband that the Disney company liked their creation so much that they were willing to pay £50 million to use the character. But the happiness didn't last long. Soon, the woman told them that criminals had learned about the big deal and wanted to take most of the money while threatening to kill the whole family. Dina also found a way out. She cleverly told her husband he needed to secrete himself. Lee got some fake papers right away and ran away. The woman, however, was very smart and got Lee to write her several threatening letters and record several similar phone calls. She said that this would show that he hated his wife and stop the mafia from after her. The husband did what his wife told him to do because he didn't think anything was wrong. He then ran away. Lee was willing to do any job because he was in a new city and didn't have a home or any friends. He sent all the money he made to his wife and son so they didn't have to worry about anything. Most likely this escape really did save his life, but not from imaginary thieves. His own wife was the real threat. Dina married her new love, Julian, in November of the same year, 1991. The wedding was paid for with the money Lee had sent home, even though Dina had lied to him about it. Webb was deeply in love and very happy, but soon after the wedding, neighbors noticed that the woman often went to see her lovers while her husband was at work. After some time, she told Julian that she was dying and that her job had fired her because of it. The story about the fatal diagnosis and being fired was a lie from the beginning to the end. It also turned out that a lot of money had been taken from the company where Dana worked, and she was the main suspect in the crime. After that, the woman said that her first husband, Lee Wyatt, threatened her and made her do the crime. She showed proof in the form of the letters and recordings that she had herself persuaded him to make. Wyatt went back home as soon as he found out that his wife had married someone else. A scandal was all that the case was about, and Dana said he beat her, but there was no proof of this. The detective still chose to side with the woman, though, so Lee had to quickly leave Yapton again. When Julian was in love, his situation didn't bother him at all, and he spent all of his savings on her fake illness so she could get better. While the money was still there, time went on and Julian began to wonder how the treatment was going. It turned out that the woman didn't have any medical records to back up her diagnosis. Family relationships broke down, and neighbors heard the spouses yelling at each other. Julian's sudden death happened in June 1994, just one day after his 31st birthday party. His mom called him the night before the terrible event, but Dina said her husband wasn't feeling well and couldn't answer. Julian's mom told her sister-in-law to call an ambulance, but her sister-in-law didn't listen. The experts found that the young man died of a drug overdose, but no one thought that this was a criminal act, and the man's wife insisted that her husband had chosen to end his own life. She also wanted Julian's body to be burned, but his parents were very against this. After she died, Dina tried to get a big insurance payment from her husband, but she was turned down because their marriage was ruled invalid. Dina didn't even try to cry or show sadness at the funeral. Instead, she wore an honest outfit and acted rudely. Almost right away after that, the widowed woman started having a lot of affairs and romances. She didn't hide the fact that she had lovers over. She did it in public. Dina filed for divorce from her first legal husband in 1997. A little less than a year later, she met Richard Thompson and fell in love with him right away. Dana didn't give it much thought before telling her new lover that she was very sick and didn't have long to live. The man, who was deeply in love with her, promised to make the last few months of her life into a fairy tale. He was ready to spend all of his savings on this. The wedding took place in one of Florida's best hotels, and the couple spent their honeymoon there before moving to Brighton, England, on the south coast of their home country. Richard said that the way his wife cared for and supported him literally put a spell on him. She also skillfully pretended to agree with all of his ideas and goals. He had always wanted to own his own boat so that he could fish professionally. His wife not only liked the idea, but she also suggested that he start a business renting out yachts so that he could fish and teach other people how to fish. A romantic dinner was planned for Dina and her husband on New Year's Eve, less than a year after they got married. After taking a bath together, she told her husband she had made him a special gift and asked for permission to tie him up. Richard agreed right away because he didn't think anything was wrong. He had ropes around his hands, a blindfold over his eyes, and a gag in his mouth when he was hit hard on the head with a bat. This was followed by another hit. Thanks to his quick thinking, Richard not only didn't pass out but also got away quickly. After that, Dina got a knife and cut her husband in the shoulder. Richard took the gun away from his wife, held her down, and called the police. She broke down in tears and told him she had been lying to him the whole time and spent all of his money. Once she got to the police station, though, she calmed down and started to say that her husband had attacked her and that she was only protecting herself. The story didn't end there. The next day, a real estate agent came to Richard's house to try to sell it. The landlady told him that her husband had left for America on a business trip before their meeting. Richard knew at that moment that his wife was planning to kill him, sell the house, and take the money. Because everyone thought Thompson had crossed the ocean, no one would look for him. It turned out that the woman had taken all of her husband's money out of his bank accounts and used his credit cards to rack up a lot of debt while the case was going on in court. A lot of people heard about the case, and other men who used to be with Dina and were cheated on and drained of money by her lies about a fake disease that could not be cured started to call the police. The woman's first husband then talked about how he had to hide for many years, first from people who thought the mafia was after her, and then from the police. It turned out that Dana had stolen from the company where she worked, even though she blamed her husband for everything. Even though there was strong evidence against the woman, she was found not guilty of attacking her husband, Richard Thompson. Some people said that Richard made up the story to get attention for himself. Dina was still found guilty of many financial frauds and given a sentence of almost 4 years in prison. All the attention on Dina Thompson also made people think of her second husband, journalist Julian Webb, who died in a strange and sudden way. The woman herself gave very different stories about how and why he died. She said that the steroids her husband took to stay in shape were killing him. Then she said he drank a lot and then passed out in the sun, getting sunstroke. She even said that he killed himself at the inquest, even though she had warned them not to. Dana told her best friend that she had poisoned her husband by putting strong drugs in a dish that he loved that was spicy. The police were able to find the owner of the diner where Julian often ate and picked up food to go. He remembered that Webb's wife had made rice and chicken curry the day before the terrible event. Then, the police thought that this seasoning might have been hiding the real taste of the drugs. Because new information came to light, a new investigation was started, and Julian's body was dug up and sent to be looked at. It turned out that the man was poisoned by a lot of strong antidepressants that were mixed into his favorite curry dish, and then made stronger by aspirin, which Dina mixed into her husband's drink. Webb was still alive when his mother called. He could have been saved, but that wasn't a plan from his wife. For the first time, the Black Widow was put on trial in 2003. During the hearing, the investigator said she was the most dangerous woman he had ever worked with, and the judge said she was a very good liar. Dina Thompson was given a life sentence with the possibility of parole after 16 years. People have made documentaries about the crimes of the Black Widow, talked about them on TV, and written about them in the news. Detectives found out about another scary event in Dina's past, even after she was in jail. The person who was one of her first lovers never showed up again and has still not been found, dead or alive. Stanislav Kostov was the young man's name. He lived in Bulgaria, which is where Dana trained as a gymnast in the late 1970s. A romantic relationship started between them, and then the guy was never seen again. The investigation doesn't rule out the possibility that Dana has something to do with this case, and Kostov was one of her first victims. But there was nothing that could be shown. Thompson worked with a prison psychologist and took rehabilitation classes while she was in jail. The detective in charge of Dina's case says that she doesn't feel bad about what she did and can commit another crime even though she has been good and said the right things about re-education and admitting her mistakes. Still, Black Widow, who was 61 years old, was let out of prison in the summer of 2022. Richard Thompson said he wouldn't feel safe now that he knows about it because he doesn't know what to expect from his ex-spouse. Now Dina has to tell the police about all of her relationships and connections, stay inside after dark, and report all of her financial transactions. She also can't talk to her ex-husbands or lovers who were hurt by what she did. She has to wear a special bracelet on her leg that keeps track of everything she does. A few months after she was freed, reporters caught Thompson coming back from the store with a big bag of shopping. On her right hand's ring finger, there was a huge ring that looked a lot like an engagement ring. It is possible that the Black Widow caught another gullible person in her web. Share your opinion with us in the comments and subscribe to the channel for more.